Okay, we will begin with the approval of the agenda. If I could get a motion.
Sure. I'll try that.
That would be great.
Madam President, I move that we approve the agenda with the following amendments. Additional classified and certified personnel actions. Add an item E4B, out-of-state trip for the ROTC All-Service Nationals. And add item E5A, technology bid for access points and switches.
Can I get a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is that an aye from you, Dana?
You did it, and
Okay, thank you. All opposed? Motion passed. And then we will move on to our recognitions. Do we have any public comments? No. First up is the JROTC National Recognition.
Actually, Mr. Norby's got several here. We're going to
Okay.
let him
You're
introduce
the
for
star
us.
of the show.
Well, as you all know, we're really proud of the activities that we have at Garden City High School, the students that participate in them and have such great talent, but also the adults that lead them and mentor them and have a lot of success with them. And so we've got 3 recognitions for you tonight. The first one, to do the first one, I'll call forward Colonel Burr, Sergeant Peterson with our ROTC group, and let them explain the great adventure that awaits them later on this spring.
Thanks, sir. Come on up, guys, please. Madam President, Board, I am Lieutenant Colonel Chris Burr. I've been with your program for 4 years. We have a great group of kids that we're working with this year. The seniors are representing the freshmen, sophomore, juniors. They're all focused. Great energy is coming out of them, and a lot of that is due to my new partner. I picked up First Sergeant Peterson about a year and a half, or he's on his 3rd semester now here at Garden City High School JROTC, and he is new energy that is doing great things for the program. The Nationals, he'll talk with you about. He kind of knew the process to get us to Nationals. I was oblivious to it, and you look for the man with the expertise and you get after it. But more important than that, we have 3 of our cadets that will be talking with you here in just shortly. First Sergeant, would you?
Let you introduce. These are our cadets that are going to nationals. I'm going to let Jamale Reyes. She is our battalion commander currently right now in a corps of 158 cadets, which is extremely exciting. But she's the one that oversees these 2 individuals, makes sure that they do the practices they're supposed to do and are doing the things that they have to do to be successful. So I'm going to let her take the horn here real quick and introduce these 2 commanders to you so you know a little bit about them.
Hello, good evening. As First Sergeant said, I am Lieutenant Colonel John Reyes, and here I have Brandon Peterson, which is the commander of drill team, and then right here to my right is Jay Evans, which is the commander of color guard. If you guys want to say something about the team this morning?
So, like our lovely battalion commander just said, my name is Brandon Peterson. What? You gotta acknowledge. My drill team, we've gone through kind of a hectic year because we didn't know who all was going to go to this recent drill meet that we just went to in Leavenworth. Placed 7th in our newcomers.
Out of 23 teams.
Out of 23 people, I can't even talk. Out of 23 JROTC programs that participated in the Leavenworth competition that we just went to, not last weekend, but the weekend before, we placed 7th out of 23. So that's actually really amazing that we've been able to do that. And nationals should be.
Right now, it's currently 48 teams that are signed up for nationals.
Hopefully, we can pull off a first. But that's wishful thinking.
I am Jay Evans. I am the commander of the JRTC Color Guard, and I am currently leading a group of 7 people but I am only taking 3 with me to the actual competition in Denver, was it? And I think we got 17th place in Leavenworth with my varsity color guard. And we're hoping to get way higher than the nationals.
As you all have been introduced, I am First Sergeant Peterson. I am new to the program here at Garden City High School, not new to JROTC. A lot that goes on behind the scenes that no one understands. This young man right here, his team that's going to nationals, just to kind of personify how amazing this is an all-freshman team. All freshmen that are going to go compete at the national level against some of the greatest schools in the world. And when I say that, this is a national level for all JROTCs. They'll be competing in the all-service nationals, which includes Navy JROTC, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and the Army itself. Right now, there's 48 schools across the world that will be there, from Guam and China, from Seoul, Korea, and even Germany, that will be there to compete against these guys. They've worked hard. They've done a great, outstanding thing. How did they get there? I just happen to know a first sergeant who happens to be a national champion from Grant High School that I worked with over the last 4 years. I sent him a video to ask the young man to say, hey, you mind looking at this video and telling me what we need to fix? Unbeknownst to me, he sent the video to the national board. They reviewed it, sent it back, and said, hey, we would like to invite your team to participate at the national level at Denver. Now, to personify some logistics here, just so the board knows, there is really no cost to you for this competition. Basically, the Army picks up the tab for our travel, they pick up the tab for our food, and they also pick up the tab for our room and board. So at this point in time, there is no additional expense to Garden City and USD 457 for these young cadets to go to Denver, Colorado and compete.
Good job, guys.
Sir, like I was saying beforehand, we started the year, when he arrived a year and a half ago, we were at 100. When I arrived, we were at 87. Right now, our high water mark for this school year is 158. And we're not going to lose, but right now, 9 seniors. We may lose some juniors and sophomores, but we usually have about 50 to 60 freshmen come up every year. That'll push us in the 180, 190 cadet range, which is a great growth for this program. I attribute it to these cadets right here for their great leadership, and the first sergeant for bringing a lot of energy in. We've got a program that's happening right now.
Thank you guys, and I want to brag on this program a little bit because I know how hard the students and the staff work, because you guys are everywhere in the community. At almost every event that I'm out into, participating in some way, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Real quick,
Yeah, good luck
luck.
at National.
Yes. Come by
You
and
want to shake hands?
shake our hands.
First sergeant is supposed to be
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, great job.
Congratulations. So, graduation, right? You're gonna be ready for graduation. All right. Let's see you then. Congratulations. Good luck. Good luck, guys. Congratulations. Good luck. First Sergeant, thanks so much again. Absolutely. My pleasure. Lieutenant Colonel, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
ROTC is one of those programs we're really, really proud to have at Garden City High School. They're in their 11th year of having it, and at the time, for a long time, we've been the only school west of Wichita to have an ROTC program. Dodge is in their first year of having a program now, and from what I understand, Liberal will have a program next year. But having our decade of ROTC, we really think has set us apart and has filled a void, I think, in the interest of our students that we really didn't know we had until we brought them in and kids have just flocked to them, and you can tell why the energy and the things that they've got going on is great. The second recognition for Garden City High School tonight is Coach Prieto. We get Coach Prieto to come in along with Sebastian. All right. So tonight we're happy to have Sebastian Lopez. We're happy to have Coach Carlos Prieto, Coach Paul Lappin here to recognize Sebastian for winning the state championship about a week ago or 10 days ago at the state tournament. So we're really proud of what he's accomplished through a lot of hard work, along with his coaches, his mentors. I'll let you go ahead, Carlos.
No, really happy for Sebastian. He worked his tail off. The entire team, we worked our tails off, and for us to come back and get third place this year, I think was a true testament with the kids, believing in us coaches. I told our coaching staff this is probably one of the best coaching jobs that we've done in the last 10 years, just because we only had one returning state placer, and this big guy right here. And so we knew we had him to build on. He was kind of the foundation, and he is a big foundation. So, really proud of you. We got a big tournament we're going to in a couple of weeks. We're going to Virginia, big national tournament. Trying to get these guys exposed to colleges and so forth, and we look forward to it. So anyway, Coach, anything?
Go Buffs.
Bashi?
Coach, what grade is Sebastian in?
He is just a sophomore. Yeah. So we have him for a couple more years. So anyway, he's a multi-sport athlete as well. Plays football. I think he ran track last year or participated in track or baseball as well. This year I think he's going to maybe just concentrate on wrestling in the spring and go train and try to get better. So anyway, big things from this guy in the future.
Oh, I did. A lot.
Extra points if you'll throw the superintendent. Congratulations. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
And our third recognition tonight will be of another national qualifier, and I'll have Miss Alice Hilt, who is really director of our theater programs and a lot of our performing arts at Garden City High School, come on in here and describe our third and second of our national qualifying.
Thank you. I'm Alice Hilt, and I'm the theater teacher at Garden City High School. And a few weeks ago, we held our local English-speaking union national qualifying tournament, which takes then a student to the state level, which we do that through the Kansas City branch. And so this year, Shyla was our representative, and this is Shyla Cowell. She's a senior, and she's also the head of my theater International Thespian Troupe Society, so she's the president this year as well. And she was selected from the local to go on to our regional branch, and there she placed second, and so she is actually first runner-up for the English-speaking union, and should the person who is in first place not be able to go, she would get a free trip to New York City to perform her monologue and her sonnet celebrating the work of William Shakespeare. So shall I talk a little bit about what she did?
Hi, my name is Shyla Cowles. I am the president of GCHS Drama Department. So when I first started, I started at the high school and stuff. Everyone came in, did a little competition. We all had to memorize a Shakespeare monologue and a sonnet from a chosen list. I performed there and I got first place. Another classmate, Phoebe, got second, so she was runner-up for that, and so I went on to state level. Unfortunately, we did have to do that through Zoom because of COVID, but it's good for us performers because when we get sick, that's an issue. So I performed at state level and I placed second, which honestly was it was a really fun experience and stuff. I think it was great for my experience. There were so many opportunities I got through it. I got a lot of contacts with like professional theater people, so it was really great. Yeah, it was overall a great opportunity for me and for any other like thespians and actors, and I really recommend, like, if your kids are into theater, definitely get them into it because you get to meet a lot of cool people. It's definitely a career where you can build, and it's fun. So
it's nice to acknowledge, I think, Shiloh, this month too, because the month of March is also school Theater in Our Schools Month, and so we promote the importance of theater education in our schools during the month of March. So it's really cool to get this recognition as well.
Questions or comments?
We probably have over 250 kids in the high school participating in some capacity, whether it be through technical theater, which is our biggest numbers. I get about 75 per semester, and sometimes those are crossovers and sometimes not. And then I probably have about 60 to something actors that participate in different shows throughout the year. So we got a lot.
Got your hands on the full. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Shiloh. Yes, ma'am. Melissa, congratulations.
It's nice to be able to do these recognitions. We got a lot of talented kids, and not much of this is possible without the really talented mentors, the colonel, the sergeant, Coach Prieto and his talented staff, and Miss Hilt and all the great things that happen with our theater program. They do a wonderful job, but it's also due to the support that we know that we get from you, from all of our activities, whether they're the athletics or ROTC or the arts. We know that we have support here with the board, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then next up we have a recognition of the Read Across America Committee. I wasn't sure who was presenting on that.
Madam President, Board. I'm Gil Pereira. I'm the president of the Garden City Teachers Association. And right now, I would like to extend recognition to our Read Across America Committee. It is a committee that is dedicated to promoting literacy and reading for all of our kids. And primarily what they do is they get together with each other and they put together a monthly list so that teachers and principals can take advantage of if they so desire. I'm going to go ahead and let the committee members introduce themselves, and we'll go from there.
I'm Ronnie Knight. I'm Victor Nellis librarian.
Lindley Anderson, Charlestone's librarian.
My name's Tammy Briggs, and I'm the librarian at Buffalo Jones Elementary School.
And I'm Cheryl Harris. I'm an interventionist at Alton Brown Elementary.
And we are missing, I'm sorry, Gil, we are missing two of our members this evening, Belinda Ruscon, who teaches second grade at Alton Brown Elementary, and also Morgan Alleman, who is kindergarten at Florence Wilson. They could not be with us tonight.
This is a new committee for the GCEA. We established this last year. So for the amount of work and the tremendous efforts that they've put together, they've done an outstanding job. And we are a committee that is dedicated to reading. And I owe it all to these ladies who keep everything going. I'm going to let Ms. Anderson go ahead and talk to you about a larger part of the association, and it is called the Reader Circle, and she will introduce that to you guys and let you guys know what all of that is about.
Okay. Thank you, Gil. So I am coming on as the new Southwest KNEA Reading Circle Commissioner for 2022 to 2024. I served 3 years. And the Kansas NEA Reading Circle Commission has been in existence since 1926. And it is a commission of 15 commissioners, one from each UNISERV. And every year we put together a list of over 180 plus titles that comes out in this book, Kansas NEA Reading Circle, which has been provided to school libraries and districts across the state of Kansas. Each committee, there are 4. There's a primary, which is K4. There's an intermediate, which is, K2. Intermediate, which is 3-5. Junior committee, which is 6 through 8, and that's the committee that I will be serving on. And then there's a high school committee. So each commissioner will receive anywhere between 250 to 350 books in the mail, beginning here soon, that we are expected to read and write reviews on. We then come together at our annual meeting in January to put together a list of our top 60 titles that we will recommend across the state of Kansas. They will be affixed. Mrs. Knight has some examples that she brought back with us. They're affixed with a Kansas NEA Reading Circle Commission sticker that designate that they have been awarded one of the top 60 spots. They're also stamped on the inside, compliments of the Kansas NEA Reading Circle, because at our district UNISERV, which was just held in February of this year, these books are taken to that UNISERV meeting where members who attend are allowed to choose as many of the books as they would like. And then those books are taken back to their local school district and member librarian and donated into the school library system. And so I think Ronnie came back. This is just a sample. How many did you come back with this year?
10.
She came back with 10 because our former commissioner was on the primary committee. I came back with 2 because that's all that fit into my library.
You see books in front of you. These are just a few of the elementary books that were chosen by some of us. And a lot of good titles, a lot of good stories. You have the opportunity to go ahead and review those. And as Lindley said, just a few of several hundreds of books that are read and passed out to us UNISERV members.
What's nice in our library system, we can designate in that it was a donation and it was donated by KNEA Reading Circle. So I make sure whenever I have a book that's donated to the library, I do that.
So KNEA donates back to school districts statewide, thousands of dollars in reading material. Because when you take the minimum of 250 times 15 commissioners, that's a lot of books. So, and a lot of dollars. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And we try not to take all the books because it's supposed to be to all the libraries in our area, not just ours.
But Ronnie's greedy.
And that is primarily what our committee has been doing over the past several months. And it is also what our UNISERV has been doing with respects to statewide reading and promoting literacy and things of that nature. Any questions?
I don't have enough for everybody, but when we went to Georgia Matthews the other day to met with the mayor, Dana was there and she asked if I would bring these frequently asked questions. So I'm sorry, hopefully I can either get you more copies or something, but I do have a couple. But it just kind of explains the Read Across America concept. I should have made enough, I just made a couple, sorry.
And do you know how many, you had lots of events last week. Did all the schools participate in some way? Did you guys?
I think all of them participated in some way. Lindley is really good at sending out an email district-wide so that everybody has those ideas. Some of the schools did Spirit Week. We usually do it as a district, but we're really trying to get the district to see that it's year-round, not 1 week. So, like in my building, I still did a Spirit Week because they very much wanted it.
Right.
And I want it focused on what NEA focuses on if we're going to have one. And I think we'll go back to doing the Spirit Week district-wide, hopefully. but we just really want them to realize it's not 1 week, it's not 1 day, it's all year. So that was kind of why we held off on that. That was a committee decision.
And there were community members that participated in this too, is that
Correct. And when they did the proclamation at Georgia Matthews, we had the school board and the mayor, or I don't know what the assistant
Vice
mayor.
mayor.
Thank you. And then Gil and then our committee. So, and Dana and I were talking. We think that would be kind of neat to do maybe at more than just one school.
Yeah.
Even if you did it for the week at least or something, you'd at least hit 5 schools. But it was pretty neat.
In the past, for the proclamation, Mr. Cessna and the president of the GCA have usually been the ones to kick off Read Across America. I felt very strongly that because this is a new committee and they worked so very hard, that they needed to be a part of that process as well. And it was certainly a pleasure. Dana brought a book that I was just in love with. It was a farting book, and I thought that the kids would enjoy that much more than the book that she read, but she did read a specific title to the kids, and I know they enjoyed that as well.
If you were supposed to tell on that.
We're supposed to tell you. He's
Sorry,
not good
Dana.
at keeping secrets, Dana.
Well, I really appreciated being able to do that, and I really encourage other board members if you get the opportunity. And I wish I could be there in person because that was just really fun and hard work that you intend to make it happen. Kids were excited about it. The classroom that I was in was in the 3rd grade at Georgia Matthews, and they were fantastic, really great questions. Thank you for that.
Thank you for inviting us.
I would also like to extend our gratitude to Mr. Cessna, who's been very instrumental in getting the information out.
Yeah, and he does a nice job of making sure the proclamation and everything's accurate with the information I gave you.
Thank you for the time you put in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Good.
Thank you.
On to our building presentation. I think we have some very patient kids in the hallway. Yes. Good evening.
Evening.
Sign Language Club is joining us. Okay. They're not quite done.
My name is Gina Galpin. I am the principal at Bernadine Sitz Intermediate Center. We have 450 5th and 6th graders, and some of them are here tonight to share some highlights from our building. They chose the topics and the information, and most of them wrote their scripts to share with you, so I'm going to turn it over to them at this time.
Hi, my name is Aswad Morales. I'm a member of Student Council in the Sign Language Club. We have been working on learning how to sign our BSIC vision and mission statement, which will be performed through video. Vision statement. All students will become lifelong learners for a better tomorrow. Our mission? Empowering excellence today and tomorrow.
Nice job, Sign Language Club. Thank you to Mrs. Gum and Mrs. Kerr for helping with the Sign Language Club this year. All right, Sign Language Club, you may walk out.
Our values at BSIC are included in our PRIDE program. Each letter, PRIDE, stands for a value we believe is important for all students and staff to be successful now and in the future. PRIDE stands for preparation, respect, integrity, determination, and excellence. Each Each quarter we have behavior celebrations to recognize students for showing these qualities. In December we had a school-wide bingo game through Zoom. The celebrations have fun activities, games, prizes, and snacks to congratulate students on making good choices and encourage us to always do our best.
My name is Maggie Williams. I am a member of the Student Council of BSIC. In September, each homeroom at BSIC held elections and voted on a student that shows leadership qualities to represent the classroom in the Student Council. The Student Council gives input and ideas about decisions that are made at BSIC. We also believe it is important to give back to the community. This year we collected socks for October in the month of October, and we held a canned food drive for the MS House in November and December. Ms. Galpin delivered 18 boxes of canned goods during the holiday season. In January and February, we held a kindness challenge for students to encourage everyone to be kind to one another. One of the activities for the kindness challenge was a kindness matter t-shirt contest. I won the contest and will get a free t-shirt with my design on it. Students who demonstrate kindness will also be entered into a drawing for a free Kindness Matters t-shirt.
Hi, my name is Macy White. I'm a member of Student Council and I'm the president of the Bulldog Bank. Every Thursday morning, our Bulldog Bank is open for business. We partner with First National Bank to help students save money for their futures by opening savings accounts. Students who make a deposit can put their name in a drawing to win prizes at the end of the year. We have given books, medals, and goodie bags when students make deposits. It's easy to save money when you know how to do it. I put my money in my account every week. Here are some packets that you can look at. They have here. They have information, phone numbers, addresses you can see, and even you can make deposits when you look into it. I am also in orchestra and I play the cello. Orchestra is so fun and I want to do it for the rest of my life. Right now we are doing orchestra karate. There are challenges and if you complete it correctly, you gotta move on to the next belt. There are 7 belts that students can earn and we are on the 3rd one. So far we have completed the white and yellow belts. We have learned so much already. Students can play the viola, violin, cello, and bass. At BSIC, students can also choose to participate in band if they are interested in learning how to play the brass instruments instead.
My name is Journey Wilson. I'm a member of Student Council. The Student Council runs the school store on Tuesday mornings. The Student Council will also make announcements in the morning that the school store is open. The students can get passes to attend the school store and shop for a variety of items including pencils, erasers, stickers, scrunchies, and more. All items sell for $1 or less. The Student Council members choose items to sell at the school store in our meetings that are held 1 to 2 times each month. The money is either donated or used for items our school needs. The Student Council helps make decisions about who to donate the money to or what items to purchase for our school. I also participate in broadcasting. Broadcasting is offered during enrichment time at the end of every day. Each homeroom can have 1 student participate in broadcasting each semester. Students in broadcasting write and record our daily announcements for the school using our iPads and a green screen. We work hard to do this as teams of anchors, editors, scriptwriters, and researchers.
My name is Aiden Small. I am a member of Student Council. I also attend the after-school program at BSIC. The after-school program is available Monday through Thursday every week. There are currently almost 150 students enrolled in the program, and between 50 and 60 students attend on a regular basis. Students can get help with homework and participate in PE activities, crafts, and STEM activities. Students also get help with special projects such as making survival kits for teachers during parent-teacher conferences. We also made a poster to hang in the commons to welcome parents to our school. Sometimes we have guest speakers and we participate in community service projects. Students are offered a snack each day and get to participate in movie nights at the end of each month. The after-school program is free and everyone is welcome to participate.
My name is Ethan White.
My name is Caitlin Lucas.
We are on the competitive robotics team at BSIC. We have 4 competitive robotics teams. In order to qualify, you need to have good grades and you can't get any referrals. Students who qualify can fill out an application explaining why they want to be a part of the competitive robotics team. At competitions, we compete against other schools, but we also work together with them too. We earn points when our robots complete the requirements for the competition. It is important to work as a team because working together helps teams be successful. Teams that don't work together well will not earn points and may not qualify for the state competition or world. Our robots must be able to move, lift objects.
3 out of the 4 robotics teams at BSIC qualified for the state robotics competition on Saturday by earning points because we worked as a team, built the robots, and wrote the coding to help our robots move and lift objects. One of our BSIC teams made it to Worlds as state competition for teamwork. Our other teams tied for 3rd and 5th place for teamwork. I'm also a member of BSIC Choir. Choir is a place to sing and have fun. A national study by Chorus America found that kids in choir have greater academic success and more advanced social skills. Choir regulates our heart rate and reduces stress levels. I believe that choir can help kids grow and get better grades.
Thank you for everything you do. Go Bulldogs!
Thank you guys. I love seeing active student councils in our schools. You guys go above and beyond, it sounds like. Did you each write your own part? Good job. Anybody else have a comment?
Tell us about what you're holding. This was the award for the team that's going to Worlds. That
They are state champions for teamwork, and they are going to the world competition, which I believe is in Texas.
Dallas.
Great job. I have to brag because they were paired with my son. Very good. So good job for all your teamwork. That's great. Congratulations. Great job.
A lot going on. Did I hear orchestra Pilates? Did I hear that right?
Karate.
Karate. Oh, okay. I was gonna say Pilates. Okay. Very nice.
Thank you. Good job. Thanks for coming. Yeah, oh, you're going to walk by here and shake their hands.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. I see your winning shirt. Good job.
Okay, our audience suddenly got smaller. Do we have any correspondence? Okay, we will move on to the consent agenda.
Okay, Madam President, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. Do we have a second? Second. Is there any discussion? Dana, do you have anything?
I know, thank you.
Yep, okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed. And we will move on to our first board goals update. On mental health.
Well, while we're waiting, my name is Diane Elliott, and I was here a month ago talking about some various data, and now I get to come back and do a little more and tell you what we're working on in the area of social emotional learning and talk to you about the Social Emotional Learning Advisory Council. And Kim's here and she'll talk about the mental health intervention team intervention team. It's not a pilot
we make
anymore,
lots of
right?
acronyms to confuse each other.
So,
We can go like that, I guess. That'll work.
okay.
Does that work?
Is there a clicker?
Yeah.
I'm so special, right? I gotta use a clicker.
It won't click unless you're.
It won't click.
Well, I can't get it to go.
Oh, shoot.
It's all right, we'll get it.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Thank you.
Just need somebody smarter than me to do it, I guess.
So, the Social Emotional Learning Advisory Council was formed a few years ago, and there was some increases in some data that we were seeing, and some of those included an increase in drug, alcohol, and tobacco discipline referrals, additional needs for foster families and students, an increase in self-harm, suicidal ideation referrals. And so this council was formed to meet monthly, look at data, and determine projects to try to target decreasing some of the risk factors, improving prevention education, and helping with protective factors. So, so why do we have this? Part of the reason is because that it is one of 5 Kansas State Board of Education outcomes, so it's tied to our accreditation. Another reason is research shows that social emotional learning and improving those protective factors increases connection to school, which helps people, students choose to stay in school, and improves their academic outcomes. We also have fewer conduct problems and increased pro-social behaviors such as kindness, cooperation, teamwork, all of those things that you just heard about in some of the reports. So another reason is that community members and businesses, when surveyed, they want people who can conflict manage, decision make, and those teamwork skills, those are what will propel students fast into their career, just as important as finishing their academics. So it also connects to several different board goals. Improving students' self-awareness, social emotional awareness, and decision making. Implementing a comprehensive assessment system. We look at social emotional behaviors and screeners. And we also want to implement tiered supports, including in behavior, so that we respond to individual student needs. There's more of your board goals. Promoting a healthy school and community through wellness, assessing indicators of unhealthy student behaviors, and growing partnerships with the community. And so, how does the council do that? We have a lot of different community partners. This is not a complete list, but you can see that it runs the gamut from birth to beyond. And we also have healthcare representation, juvenile detention center, law enforcement, as well as a variety of school district representation, school nurse. Some people that maybe you don't think of right away, but they may see things that we don't always see. So that's the council. What the council does is we review data, we hear reports from community partners, we ask questions, we make suggestions, brainstorm ideas. Possible projects are identified. In my position now, I get to then work with partners, school staff, administrators, district administrators on implementation. It's not just things that our council necessarily comes up with, but it could be a variety of different works in progress. Some of the council-related activities over the past few years. Parent University, it's on GardenCitySchools.com under the Parent section. If you go down to Parent University, there are several different resources to help parents go for information if they want to talk to their students about alcohol or vaping or bullying or texting. There are some resources there. There are also lists of counseling services in Southwest Kansas and resources in that area as well. The Stop It app, that was started a few years ago, but we've just received grant to continue it for another 2 years, and that allows for people students and parents to report concerning things that they want the school staff to be aware of. Partnership with Live Well Finney County, that's one of the things that is a big celebration for us this year. They have, in the past, provided training for administrators on mental health first aid for principals to then watch for concerns among staff. But they've also partnered with us so that I've been trained in providing mental health first aid for adults who work with youth, and I've been able to offer a few courses so far and have plans to offer more. So that's for parents, for coaches, for youth group workers, whoever has concerns, who sees youth in their personal or professional capacity, to give them tools to help youth. Another thing that we're working on with Live Well Finney County is bringing teen mental health first aid to Garden City Achieve. So that will be something that helps with actually providing teens the ability to listen to each other and give them the know-how when to say, hey, we need to go talk to someone. So another couple things that have happened this year, council partners are among those participating in the Garden City High School Family Nights that the counselors there organized. Genesis, Finney County Attorney's Office, the Sheriff's Office, Live Well Finney County, and ABC Pregnancy are all council partners who participated and presented at those family nights. Some projects on the horizon. We are working on a public information campaign related to vaping, cyberbullying, suicide prevention, and increasing protective factors for students and families. I already mentioned teen mental health first aid. I'm super excited about that. Another thing that we're starting is SOS, Signs of Suicide Prevention Program in the middle schools. And so that'll be something that's coming up next year. Some data. I know that we talked about the Kansas Communities That Care survey results, but there's a lot more data that we have that helps us understand where we are with social emotional learning. And I wanted to just show that there are some ups and downs that we've seen over the past few years. Alcohol, e-cigarettes, and marijuana, They both, they all three, had a high in 2018-19 and then dipped back down. So that's been really good to see. Our actual tobacco, drug, and alcohol discipline referrals at the high school have decreased from 3 years ago first semester to this year, mostly in tobacco. So if you look, our tobacco referrals in 2018-19 at the high school, they were 60 in the first semester of 2018-19 and 38 in the first semester this year. Drug referrals stayed about the same, and so did alcohol. Our universal screener is one of the tools that we use to determine if students need small group intervention with a counselor. And on that, we've had an increase in the number of students who are in the low risk category. So 85.58 students were in the low risk category in the fall of 21 compared to 83.2 in the fall of 19 and 67.76 in the fall of 2018. That was the first year that we gave that screener, so that could maybe account for part of that huge difference, in addition to our implementation of a lot of efforts. So that's been a big improvement. Pre-K and kindergarten students take the ASQ social emotional screener, and those are rated by a parent or guardian, and we've also seen an increase in no concerns of 5% in the past few years. Self-harm referrals have also decreased in the past few years. We had 205 in 2018-19 and now 37 through January of 22. So I went over that really fast, but do you have any questions?
I have a question. So your trends seem to be kind of going in the right direction from the data that you presented us this evening. What are some factors that you think have helped that?
I think there are several things, but there's been a lot of efforts with prevention education, and there may be some more detail in that area from some of the others here. But another factor is that we did implement our Tier 1 curriculum in
Last year.
Was it last year?
Last year was our first year.
First year, okay. So last year was our first year for that, and the Stop It app we also pushed out, and I think that had some impact as far as giving it an opportunity for people to report if they felt like they needed to. Do you have?
I would also say, I think what Kim's going to talk about here in a minute with our Mindful Student Program, I think that's probably had a significant impact too on just having the availability for our kiddos to have access to that mental health support. I think that's had a big impact on when we look at the self-harm data that we've seen and the major decrease we've seen there. I think having that access in the building. We've not been as lucky this year because Compass is dealing with the same struggles that we are as far as hiring certified staff, and so the therapist that we did have that was working in the buildings actually left Compass, and we stole her, and she's a counselor for us at Garfield now, which was good for us, but not good for us at the same time. So I do think that that's had a pretty good impact on that too.
Another thing I'll add is that the high school and KH and now Garden City Achieve have a Resist chapter, which is geared toward anti-tobacco messaging, education about vaping, kind of putting the message out there about the safety concerns, the health concerns, all of that education that kids may not think about right away. But peer-led, and so it really helps that be a cool thing to quit because it's run by students.
Is the reduction like middle school and high school?
The reduction isn't as great. I need to look at the data again, but it's a little bit higher than we would like for the younger grades.
But I would also say that their numbers weren't as high
Right.
to start with either, so you're
Yeah.
not going to see as big of a, you know what I mean?
Can you give a little information? I had a second question about the screener.
Yes.
So each grade has a screener appropriate for.
Yes. The screener is just like when we have a math or literacy screener. It's given 3 times a year at the same time as the other screeners that we have. And it is the social, academic, emotional, and behavior screener. And what the students do if they are in 2nd grade through 12th is that they rate themselves on several questions. If they are in kindergarten and 1st, the teachers only rate them, and then 2nd through 12th, the teachers also rate the students in those same areas that the students rate themselves. So each domain, the social domain, the academic domain, and the emotional domain, they have target scores and they have different questions. So like in the social domain, they might ask about how they get along with peers. In the academic domain, they might talk about how they feel about, do they feel prepared for school? Do they get nervous about tests? Just different things like that. In the emotional domain, it'll be about anxiety or things that self-regulation. I was thinking of something else, but I lost it, so I apologize. But yeah, so there's different domains, and then there's a whole target score. And the target score is what we look at, among other things, to determine whether a student needs more support.
So when you gather the data from the teacher and from the student, are those pretty well correlated, or sometimes you see some?
Sometimes not, sometimes they are. And sometimes those things can give us oh man, we need to check on this kiddo. Because they're saying that they feel like they need more support. And we can notice that because of how they rated themselves. There are some students that, don't show how they're feeling sometimes. And so when we see those big differences, that helps us know that there might be something to look into. Conversely, there are sometimes times when a student rates themselves a lot higher than a teacher, and we can look at that as well.
And we can compliment their self-esteem.
Their self-confidence.
I think a lot of the things where that helps is the kiddos that are really quiet and don't say a whole lot. Those are the kids that teachers tend to think there's no problems with. Well, they may be dealing with anxiety or depression, and you don't notice that because they're just quiet, and you think they're the quiet kid in class who's not causing any problems, but they may not be behaviors that you would see outwardly, but they're more internal behaviors that they're dealing with. So I think that definitely helps the teachers recognize that.
Yeah, you kind of answered my next question, like, what do you do with anomalies?
Yeah, when they're in the younger grades, like 2nd grade is the first time that they rate themselves. And so that is where the biggest difference is between the teacher and the student rating. But it's the first time they're taking that. They're still developing awareness of the vocabulary, the concepts, what that looks like. So in the earlier grades, you know, it may be a conversation with the student that the counselor has. Several of our counselors have talked about how when they notice those differences, they'll talk to that little third grader or second grader and, you know, try to figure out if there's something more there. But yeah, second grade, like I said, is the biggest difference. Yep.
So I'm gonna piggyback on that because that was my question is, and I'm not sure how this test is administered because do they have conversations? Do they go through the questions? Because even the concept of like self-regulation, I just wonder at what age are kids really understanding what that means? Because it can, you know, there's lots of different maybe things to self-regulate. And so I just wonder, and the other thing I was thinking about too was, are kids okay? Is this administered in a way that, because there's still like some stigma attached with mental health or those types of things. So I just wondered if it was administered in a way that maybe like your older kids feel comfortable like answering honestly, or is that an issue at all?
Well, in the earlier grades, when they take those screeners, what I've seen is that they will put on their headphones because a lot of the parts are read to them. And they're all doing it at the same time. It's a common practice, a common procedure. So it's something that they're used to. And up through the upper grades too. I mean, it's a routine, basically. And so, and the way that they sit, usually there's not people looking over each other, so it seems.
Okay. And I would say when they're done, they're not going to have access to their scores. Nobody's going to be able to see. They're not going to know, and nobody around them is going to know whether they scored high risk or some risk or low risk. That's something that the teacher has to pull up later.
So with the older kids, you do feel like they will they're good at kind of.
I think so. I mean, from my perspective, with the older kids, most of the time, not all of the time, but I would say most of the time, those scores are usually within just a few points of what the teacher would rate them at. Oftentimes, I mean, we do have a few of those anomalies, but most of the time, I think they take it as serious as they do any of those assessments. You know, so.
And I think as they take it over time, there's more awareness of what those things mean, and they have different, like they have a health class, they have different counseling lessons, they have certain things that help them develop that awareness.
You guys are in for a treat because technology and I don't usually get along, so we're gonna just hope I don't screw this all up now. Good evening, I'm Kim Fisher. I'm the Behavioral Health Liaison for the district, and I'm gonna spend a few minutes talking to you about mental health intervention teams. USD 457 has had mental health intervention teams for 4 years. This is our 4th year with this project. And 457 was one of the first districts in the state to start one of these projects. And in our, behind already. It is funded through the state legislature and supported by KSDE. And for this school year, we're serving 12 buildings in the district. So 7 elementaries, both intermediates, both middle schools, and the alternative education center. In our district, we called this program the Mindful Student Support Program. So you might hear some interchanging of that language. Apparently, we like to call things really large acronyms, so we gave it a big name for you to remember. And it is a partnership between Compass Behavioral Health, our local community mental health center, and the district. And the goals, the overarching goals of the project are to reduce barriers to mental health treatment for students, and a special focus given to students in foster care. As we know, oftentimes they're moving a lot, so that prevents some different and unique challenges for them. And I've put the board goals there that the Mindful Student Support Program addresses for you. Similar to Diane's, 1.5 and 3.4, those are ones she read to you for her information. We are excited that the legislature has approved funding again for next school year, so we will be able to continue the program. And as Mr. Guinan alluded to earlier, unfortunately, currently we do not have a therapist serving kids in schools through this program because she left and is now at Counselor Garfield. And Compass has had a very challenging time rehiring therapists right now.
And that doesn't mean that the kiddos aren't getting therapy. It just means that they're not getting therapy in the school. The parents have to take them to the office to get their therapy appointments, so they're still able to have access, and they still get attendant care, and they still get case management and all those things in the school. They just don't have the therapist that's able to come to the building because they don't have the resources to make that happen right now.
So to give you just a little bit of information on how students would come to be in the Mindful Student Support Program, we have a QR code that links to a Google form, and all of the principals and counselors in the buildings we serve have access to that. And they then just fill out a very simple, short referral form for the student and what the concerns are for the student. After they've gotten permission for the parent or guardian to do that, we do ask that they receive parent or guardian permission before referring. And upon completing that referral, it comes to me, and then I contact the parent or guardian to give them just a little more information, answer any questions they might have about the program, and help schedule an intake for them with the Compass therapist. Traditionally, that intake could be done at school or at Compass. Again, since we're missing that therapist right now, they do have to go to the Compass office for that. After that intake, they'll be offered services based on their needs and medical necessity. So that could be individual therapy, and as Mr. Guinan said, traditionally that would be at school during their school day, which helps reduce that transportation barrier for a lot of students. Could be community-based services, which are things like case management, attendant care, and therapy, or it could be medication evaluation and management. Again, those are all based on just that individual student's need and the medical necessity. And parents and guardians have the final say of continuing with those services at any time. And we monitor progress for those students involved through 2 reports, one at the end of the first semester and one at the end of the year. And I have a little information. Sorry, that's really small. This is last school year's end of the year report. So you can see we served 187 students last school year in this program. And we look at 4 main data points: attendance, academics, internalizing behavior, and externalizing behavior that we want to see improvement in for the students. So you can see some of those percentage totals for last year over on the side. The attendance for students involved improved by 47%. 47% of the students involved improved their attendance. Academics, 64% had improvement. Externalizing behavior, about half of them had improvement. And internalizing, about 30%. So externalizing behaviors would be like OSS, ISS, referrals to the principal, insubordination, so they're verbally acting out to a staff member or something like that. Internalizing behaviors would be more along the lines of suicidal ideation or maybe repeated visits to the counselor's office for anxiety or depression. Those kinds of things would be internalizing behaviors. So we collect all that data from Skyward, from behavior reports, attendance reports, and those kinds of things. And
Quick question on
Yep.
that last slide, if I
Sure
may.
thing.
I just kind of wrap my mind around, there's a difference between referred, I think you have 144 referral for services, but total students served exceeded that.
So some students carry over from one year to the next, so I think that's why you see the difference. So a student may have participated last year, is still participating this year, but it wasn't a new referral counted in that.
Thank you.
So this is just a little snapshot of data from our fall semester of this year. We're at 172 students served. Attendance improved for 86 of those students. Academics improved for 97 of those students. And then for external behavior improvement, we had 128 students who on that referral, external behavior was marked as a problem. Of those 128, 104 so far have shown improvement in that first semester. And similarly, 9 of 16 for internal. Served 25 foster students last year, 23 so far this year. late and I didn't get it on a slide, but calendar year for 2021, Compass saw 829 crisis appointments total. 17 or younger, 426 of those, 829. And for kind of the time frame of our fall semester, 200 of those 426 were 17 or younger crisis appointments. So it kind of gives you an idea about how they're seeing kids come into their system. So I think we're trending to look pretty similar number-wise on our end of data that we're reporting from last year to this year. We see recurring referral themes of, I'd say, anger management, emotion regulation kind of things, anxiety and depression, peer or family relationships that just aren't going well, and decent amount of impulsivity that affects kind of classroom management or academic learning because they're disrupting the classroom. Any questions on any of that?
So, you don't have the number of referrals made this year yet.
Yes.
Has that increased or decreased?
So as of February 25th, when I was putting these slides together, we had 86 so far this year. I believe since then I've probably had 7 or 8 more.
Is that an increase or a
It's
decrease?
tracking pretty close to last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do we or does Compass, do they keep, do they track a lot of the data? I know you kind of talked about what different issues most of these kids get referred for. Do they do any deeper, I'm kind of like more evaluative data, these are great improvements. And you wonder, a lot of kids have, maybe not as serious to where they cause problems in the classroom, but you just wonder if some of this isn't something that could be shared or, you know what I mean? I don't want to call it mainstream, but I just wonder what kind of evaluative data, because I'm wondering what made the difference for these kids and why this, for some of them.
I will say I think that the largest portion of kids that come in as a referral to the Mindful Student Program do end up qualifying for community-based services, which would be case management, that one-on-one, usually weekly service with someone from Compass. So I would have to imagine that makes a great difference in that push. Even before they've kind of hit this really challenging time of not as many therapists right now, truly case managers are the ones that are seeing kids more frequently than the therapist. Usually you're getting into therapy once a month, if that. Right now, case managers are seeing kids weekly, not more than once a week.
Taking care every day.
Yeah, so I think that's, the kids that hit those services really see a lot of support, and I would have to think that that's very helpful in making those changes.
You say they do see a lot of support?
Yes.
That's what you, okay. Compass really doesn't share much with us, right? Because that's a different entity.
In terms
there.
of data or?
Yeah, as far as data or individual case, details, that kind of thing.
Individual case depends on if we have a signed release. So if parents will sign a release, they can check what they want shared and what they don't. So typically, we're able to get a treatment plan, which will help us know what kind of goals they're working on at Compass, a diagnosis, those kinds of things.
Oh, okay.
So as long as parents sign a release, yes.
And we do that a lot, Mark, when we have like IEP meetings. If the kiddos get Compass services, we'll have information, and sometimes Compass will even come to those meetings with us.
Because obviously that's the value, particularly if they're not coming into the schools, that's the value of that relationship,
Right.
the shared information. It's sort of the team approach to helping the student get what they need.
Yep.
And so
I
that's
just
good
got
to
2
hear.
requests today that I helped connect those things. So yeah, that's a part of my job as well. And as long as that release is there.
And I would say too, for our kiddos that are really struggling, we can initiate a TEP referral for the kiddos to go to the therapeutic school. And Compass can initiate that referral, the parents can initiate that referral, or the school. So as long as the kiddo, the only requirement that we have is they have to be in Compass services. And so as long as they're in services with Compass, then there's an application, I guess you would call it, that you fill out and it comes to us, and then there's a committee that looks at that, and we determine whether that kiddo would be a good candidate for the therapeutic school.
Follow-up question then to your comments. Is there any, there's a long as they have the services from Compass. So we're not seeing so far with the shortages of therapists and that kind of thing, that there's an impediment there in qualifying.
Correct. Yeah, because they can still.
services?
Right.
Yeah.
No,
No.
no,
It
we're
just-
taking referrals, we're getting.
I would say, like at the TP, the one thing that we do struggle with is when we had a therapist on staff and was in the building, she was able to go and do their therapy sessions right there when they were at the TEP. And we don't have that now; they have to go to the office for that. But we still have staff, Compass staff that's in the building every day. They're in the classrooms. Our kiddos, when they go to that program, they go in there for they get 2 hours a day of mental health support. Most of that's not obviously with a therapist; that's with case management and things like that. But there are folks that work with them on those strategies.
One more. Sorry. So just, I mean, like so many other areas with the challenges of finding personnel, sometimes the work goes then to the, I hate to say it, but sort of less qualified or less experienced community members or staff, and I don't know what maybe I need to go to HR.
Hey, I did my part. We stole the person.
Yeah, I know. I heard that. But I guess, we, as a community and as a school district, we're just gonna do as best as we can.
Yeah.
And set the goals high and et cetera. But there's a reality there, and I'm just.
Sure.
You've got great numbers in this presentation, and it's very encouraging, and so kudos.
I will say that Kim just presented she presented to the Compass board, was it last Thursday? Well, I guess, not last Thursday, the Thursday before. But she presented to them, and one of the discussions they had talked about was the same thing. I'm sure the conversations that we have at board meetings about how they're short-staffed and what they're doing to recruit. And that's when they're doing a lot of the same things that we're doing, as far as they've got kids that are on scholarship that are gonna enter in to be therapists, but they're still a couple years out. So we've got a lot of kids in the pipeline. It's just they haven't made it to Compass yet because they're not done with school. So in a few years we'll be in good shape. We just gotta hold on and hope things go well
A new
until then.
therapist starting today over there.
Okay.
And I think a promising interview this week, which is a drop in the bucket, but it's in the right direction. So.
Well, and I will say too that in our conversations with Compass, Glenda and I have talked a lot about how we're in 12 buildings, that's great, but we have 18 buildings that we need to support. We want to get them out more. And Compass is willing to do that. They've just got to get the people, and they've already said that they've got the slot, and it's there once they get the therapist hired for us to expand into the other buildings. They've got to get the personnel in place to make that happen. They're dealing with a lot of the same issues that we're dealing with, so.
Questions? Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good evening. I'm here to talk tonight about Board Goal 2.5 reconfiguration. Board goal 2.5 is to evaluate elementary, intermediate, and middle school configurations to determine if reorganization would lead to increased student achievement and efficiency, and determine the most appropriate number of schools at each level. Before I get started, I really think we have accomplished this goal up to the point that we can, kind of leaving it in the board's lap as you're getting ready to prepare for your next 5-year cycle. So a little history about this committee. So it's really formed over 2 years and 2 committees. The first committee was chaired by Renee Scott. That committee started in 2018, and it was really the first aspect of that goal to evaluate kind of what is the best configuration for our school district. So really an in-depth process that they went through. Once that committee stopped their work, the board at the time said, okay, now we're going to go a little bit further. Then a second committee was formed. It was chaired by KJ Knoll and myself. It started in 2019. Each committee met approximately for 1 year, so a long, in-depth study. There were large committees, over 20 participants, and there was a mixture between community members, staff members, we had board representation on there, and parents as well. Committee members that started on that first group in 2018 were given the option to continue through the second cycle as well, many of which did that. So committee number 1. So they were tasked with providing the board with the best configuration for a K-8 model. Again, as a first step, before the board could make any decisions, taking what configuration we had at the time, which was the pre-K current configuration, pre-K, K4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. And then they did a lot of in-depth studies on that, huge subcommittees. Those subcommittees looked at the current configuration, a K5, 6, 8 configuration, K6, 7, 8, and then took each one of these disciplines that you see listed below and studied that out on what impact that would have based on those configurations. So as an example, curriculum and instruction. So looking at our current information that we had and then comparing those with the K5, K6 model, things like, and you've heard us talk about it a little bit as we've done textbook adoptions and those kinds of things, that split is not always really nice. It doesn't fit necessarily with what we have, so we might have K5 with some textbook adoption and then a 6-8 textbook adoption. So they really dug into that with each one of those things. What impact does it have on discipline? Is there any trends in terms of the number of referrals that we have based on those different levels, younger kids with older kids or vice versa? They did a community study. They sent surveys out and they got input from our community. If you had a choice, what would that choice be for you? Would you like this configuration or that? They did it also with the staff, and they did it with the students. So there was 3 different components to that study, and they gathered input around each one of those things. They looked at graduation rate, comparing schools like us across the nation, like us in the state of Kansas, to see was there any impact with graduation rate based on these configurations. They looked at the social emotional issues. Many of that had to do with transitions. There is some research about cutting down on the number of transitions that you have and what a benefit that is to kids. And then lastly, state assessment data, and just again comparing, is there any impact or change, noticeable change, based on that information. So at the end of that year, each one of those committees again kind of broke that down, and they looked at curriculum instruction. This is what we have learned out of our research for each one of these things. So as the curriculum subcommittee, I'm going to say we recommend configuration X. Then the same group that's studying discipline, they did that, and so on and so forth through all those different groups. And then collectively as a whole, they presented to the board to recommend the pre-K, K5, 6-8, 9-12 configuration. So that, after a year, was what the committee presented to the board. So the board at the time then said, that's great. If we choose to do that, what's next? So that's where my committee with KJ started. And our task really was to look at aligning those options, to look at that current configuration or the proposed configuration of K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. What are the pros and cons for the proposed options, and then what, of course, the costs of each of those options, And then we added something else to that task for that committee. If we were going to go through the work, and if there was any outcome to that, then let's look at safety and security measures for our schools. Primarily that had to do with two things. Tornado shelters, keeping the whole building collectively safe, and then also entrances. Not all of our schools have safe entrances. If you have ever been to Alta Brown, in order to get into Alta Brown, you key in or get buzzed in, and you go into a separate set of doors, and you can't go anywhere else but into the office. And that's not always true with all of our buildings. So we looked at what would that look like in order to add some more security measures to our schools. And then lastly, again, if we're going to get into this, are there any modifications, updates, maybe it's facial kinds of things that we can do to make our schools a little more modern? And I think it was in this meeting last time we talked about just the age of our schools. And so is there anything like that that we should add in or look at as we go through this process? So this is the committee that we worked with. Again, you can see a fairly large group. Many of those were carryover members that we had come to our group as well. And then our work really started with research. We knew what the configuration recommendation was, so what were the parameters or what kinds of impacts would things have with like a 2-building option or a 3-building option? If we were going to go with 2, we knew we were going to have large buildings. Our middle schools were going to get pretty big. So is there any impact to having too many kids? Is there like a sweet spot? Either below 500, can you go up to 1,000? So again, we looked across the state of Kansas. What is the typical building size in that kind of middle school level? What do their elementaries typically look like in terms of size? And then we also looked across the nation. And really the findings behind that were all over the board. You can kind of do any and everything. There was no magic number, if you will, as we went through that. But we studied that out. We looked at impacts on instruction, again, discipline. I talked about ideal size. And then from that, this group went through and reviewed building plans to see for us individually, if we were to add 5th grade to our elementaries as an example, what would that take? Could this particular building handle 2 more sections or 3 more sections of that 5th grade? Because we try to keep units the same. It's a 2-track school or a 3-track school, so that means that they have 2 teachers at that grade level across the school. So we broke those down with building plans, and then what impacts is that going to have on our kids? Shuffling kids around, of course boundaries could be an issue at that point. Are there any staff and instructional issues? Which I'll bring attention to later in this presentation, but even licensure could become an issue at some times. How are you properly licensed to be in that next level of building? And then cost certainly was a big part of that. So we had building plans. This is just a single example of that, but we went through every single one of our buildings with a map just like this collectively as a group. And we were fortunate enough to have a nice blend or mix of staff members. So sometimes we had to do a little research on our own, getting a hold of building principals, but for the most part, we knew what the makeup of the school was. So I know that's a little hard to read, but essentially we went through and we identified this is kindergarten room, this is kindergarten room, sped room, and we labeled every single one of those rooms, and then start to look at it from a section perspective and say, okay, are there any rooms that we could capture, reutilize, and put a 5th grade in there as an example for our elementaries. So we did that with everyone. The blue highlighted area there is an addition. 2003, that whole blue section was an addition to that school. So every one of our maps, our blueprints also have that as well. So you can see how many times the building was added on, which part was newer. So we broke those down for every one of our schools. It led us to kind of the finals, if you will, of what our sections are. So this is too hard to read, so I've given you a hard copy of this information in front of you. So our current configuration there by building, just take the top line as an example. So Alta Brown Elementary School at the time of this study, and remember this was 2 years ago, it started in the 1920 school year. So we had 4 sections of kindergarten, 4 of 1st grade, 2 of 2nd grade, 3 of 3rd grade, and 3 of 4th grade. So typically, that school at one point started off, it was a 4-track school. Then as enrollment changes, lower enrollment, you have bubble groups, that sort of thing, then that could fluctuate a little bit. But at the time, that's the sections of our classrooms that we had. So go to the right-hand side with the revised configuration. For us to make sections work for 5th grade, we would try to make that a 3-track school across the board. And so by doing so, we thought we could pick up 3 additional classrooms by making it 3-track. So you're going to gain a classroom with kindergarten, you're going to gain a classroom with 1st grade, so there's 2. They probably had 2 other classrooms they were using for something. Maybe the art teacher had a classroom, but we thought we could steal that classroom. Or it could be that part of this construction idea was we were adding classrooms to make this configuration work with this particular school. So I won't go through all those, but you can go through and look at the current configuration, what was needed, whether it be additional rooms, and we talked about adding classrooms if we needed to. So kind of low-hanging fruit first. Do they have the space available? If they didn't have the space available, then we worked with Stuart Nelson and Nick Nemechek from the Mancini, I'll get the acronym wrong, Gibson, Mancini, Nelson, and Carmichael. They were great and really, really helpful on that committee. But then they helped us look at, okay, you don't have enough room here, so we could add a section of classrooms, but they'll also meet like our FEMA requirements for storm shelters, and so we could pick up kind of both things at once. And so we went through each one of those buildings and we did that. So essentially, once we had that mastered and looking, we really needed to kind of come up with our proposal or our options. We focused on 2, having a 3 middle school option and a 2 middle school option. And these 2 things were really the basis of our study on which direction we thought we would go. So looking at the 3 middle school option, we chose Charles Stone's, and again, this was just for research purposes, but we chose Charles Stone's as our 3rd repurposed middle school. And the idea behind that was it gave us a middle school on the east side of town, one centrally located perhaps with KH, and one on the west side with Horace Good. So we could keep relatively the same size of schools. We would then repurpose Bernadine Sitz to be a K-5 elementary school. So that was one option that we looked at. The second one was to keep 2 middle schools, and then we would just basically increase the size of KH and to make it more closely match Horace Good. And in doing so, both Charles Stone's and Bernadine Sitz would become elementary schools. And then the last piece here is it talks about an a la carte projects with storm shelters, and I'll get to that tool in a minute, which is pretty amazing. So we went through and looked at the estimated costs for the 3 middle school option. So I will throw out a big caveat here. Number one, that was over 2 years ago when we came up with those numbers. So inflation, the costs, all those kinds are going to impact your decision on what you do moving forward. But at the time, at the end of the 20 school year, when we were ready to present this information pre-COVID, it was going to take about $51 million to go with the 3 middle school option. So you'd have about 600 to 700 students per building. That keeps all 3 of those middle schools relatively the same. And then we came up with just anecdotally with discussions, what are the pros and cons to having the 3 middle school options. Again, I won't go through all of those for you, but those are the pros that this group, so potentially smaller class size, getting more kids involved, less SES kids in one particular place, so maybe more instruction. All of those are kind of what if or analogies based on the experts in the room as we went through this process. Cons to having 3 middle schools, the increased need for qualified staff. So in a time, again, wasn't quite as bad as it is now with hiring people, but even at that time, would we be able to hire enough secondary licensed staff to fill another building, essentially? Not equipped for athletics, Charles Stone's would not be, so that would mean more locker rooms, bigger costs. What are you going to do with athletic fields, those kinds of things? We even got to the point where the architects took some drawings for us, and they took a football field, and they could move it around and place it kind of around our property, and what that would look like in relationship to the building itself, if the board decided that's what you wanted to do. Those decisions would have to be made. Do you share a single facility like Memorial? Are you adding these kinds of things? And that's where this a la carte project really comes in handy. So again, I won't take the time to go through those, but that gives you a ballpark on the estimated cost for the 3 middle school option. Changing gears to the 2 middle school options, so we would increase the size of KH. Horace Good would need a little work done. They're much bigger capacity-wise than KH is. So you would be in the ballpark between 800 and 1,000 students per building. Estimated cost at the time was $54 million. And then it would create some excess capacity. This particular option will have the more space available for the board to use for other reasons than the 3 middle school option. The reason for that, you have Bernadine Sitz and you have Charles Stone's as 2 of our larger facilities that we have kind of in that elementary track. Now you've just changed those to 2 of the biggest elementary schools that we have in our district, size capacity wise. So that would free up a lot of space in different areas to do different things, more so than the other option. Again, pros, the buildings are already middle schools, so already have the needed infrastructure, the gymnasiums, those kinds of things that go along with that upper level. No change to league configurations. That's one thing that one of our administrators pointed out is the current league already has 8 teams in the league, so it's an even number. Makes it easier to schedule by adding a 3rd middle school or another school in the league. That could cause some conflicts, somebody being left out or lengthening seasons, those kinds of things. Licensure was not an issue here, but could have been an issue. We didn't explore that, but it could have been an issue when you go to the 3 different middle schools. Again, is just getting the people properly licensed. With the 2 middle schools and adding 6th grade, if you're old like I am, we had a K-9 license at the time, so you could have taught middle school whatever. The state really now requires a more specialized license, so even though I'm K-9, I would need a different endorsement to teach at the secondary level in a particular content.
Certainly at this point, though, we are waiving a lot of those, are we not?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to report all of those that someone's teaching outside of a content area, yes. We still have to report those, but we have some people teaching outside of content areas. So the other piece of this that we looked at was remodeling the main offices, like we talked about, secure entrances. We looked at 10 different buildings with an estimated cost, again, 2 years ago, about $2 million. There were additional classrooms to be added in 5 buildings. That's where we went through the maps, the blueprints, if you will, and we just couldn't do it. We couldn't find space available to add those additional sections. So 5 of our buildings would need to have the storm shelter idea maybe added to that in order to address the needs. 8 total rooms in those 5 different buildings, and that was an estimated cost of about $4 million. So this is the tool. Again, I know it's super hard to see, but this is the tool that we used as we were working through it, and what the board would have available. It would need updating, obviously, when you get to that point if you decided to make that decision. But it's really handy. All right, so my glasses are terrible. My eyes are worse. But I'll show you here. So really what it allows us to do, no, it's not going to let me do it. So if we got into this, if I scroll down, I'll back up to this screen. Maybe I will. Okay, so if we back up to this screen, how this tool works is we have listed out kind of your a la carte package here, if you will. So at Plymouth, if we wanted to add a music classroom, which would again double as a storm shelter, you can click on this total. If you said, no, we don't want to do that, we only want to address the security, the office security, you can click on that, it goes away. You click on the blank button here, it gives you a drop down menu, and you can select that item, and it'll add the projected total in there for you, which essentially then begins to start your price tag differently. So you can see the different options for the different schools as we work through those plans, what we were kind of fiddling around with to get to our $50+ million proposal. So that's how those tools worked. Okay, so it kind of leads us into the big ticket item is the money, of course. And again, this is old information, but at the time, the status quo for our bond offerings was that our community impact, our growth was going to stay relatively the same as what it was, 1.5% annually. Bond and interest state aid remained at 56% for the current debt, and then tax collection rate was at 98%. So that leaves current bonds, they're going to pay out. That's the bond that was approved by the community in 2008 for the high school, and we're set to pay that off in 2034. The debt service mill levy is 7.325, and the current mill levy could be maintained. So now, if we were going to do something, again, you're making some assumptions here, that it's still going to be 1.5% annually, bond and interest rate would remain the same at 56%, the tax collection rate at 98%, bond and interest state aid equal to 24% on the new debt. So there's a big difference there between that 54% that we got then and the 24% that you see now. Part of that is based on the state aid that is available for districts. It's currently set at approximately 24%. That could change for us. There's a bill in legislation right now that would change that, would get us closer to the 50 percentile state aid that we had back in 2008. But currently, it is not that. So it's going to be at 24, which ultimately would cost the district a lot more money in the meantime. But if that goes through, that could be something you guys have to figure in, is if it goes through completely, it gets you back closer to 50%. If not, it's there's a debt cap involved and a lot more planning, and we'll have to go into that, which we won't get into right now. So the $65 million is what we've kind of rounded this up to. $65 million for a bond. Total bond debt would extend out to 2043. So that would be our new debt that we would have. And again, this is 2 years ago. Debt service mill levy would increase approximately 15.5 to 15.5 through 2034. That's when our current debt goes away. So from now until that time, it's 15.5. And then we would pick up that 6 mills once our current debt goes away. We get that paid off. Okay? So this gives you a little bit of an idea on what that means. So over a 20-year debt that we would have with our mills, $65 million debt, over 20 years, it's going to increase our mill levy to 15.5. All right, so on a home that's $100,000, that's kind of what we typically talk about. That's what our auditors talk to you about when they're giving their reports. So on that $100,000 home at 15.5 mills, that would increase to $94 a year for our community taxpayers, okay, over that 20-year life. So if the state gets their process corrected and we can get closer to that 50 percentile state aid assistance, same numbers or same factors, 20 years, $65 million, the mill increase would be 13, and so for a $100,000 home, that would be $65 if you can get the additional state aid that's currently trying to go through legislation. All right, so what does all that mean? So the board's getting ready to start your 5-year strategic plan. This is just really historical information. The 3 people that chaired this committee, they're not going to be here to go back and get it. So it's really just an update for you, giving you some information. This stuff will be available. Obviously, would have to be updated, reworked, architects, those kinds of things, if that's something the board wanted to do. Looking at our current enrollment, all those things would need to be looked at again. But as you're creating your 5-year strategic plan, if that's something you wanted to pursue, those are the factors that you're going to have to kind of weigh through as you go through that, looking at in terms of our facility use moving forward. Dr. Carlin, do you have anything to add?
I think just like the numbers that are out there, I'm sure you get questions, why don't we just make this change? Why don't we just do the reconfiguration? Well, it realistically can't happen without a significant investment. The numbers that Heath gave you, like you mentioned, are a couple years old. That includes some of the basic a la carte items, but not all of them. So the reason for the $65 million estimate was, we may want to add more a la carte items, but also costs are going up. And so there would be a lot of benefits. We hear requests for childcare space. We hear ideas about putting childcare in our schools. Some of our buildings are aging to the point that some of that excess space, it may make sense at some point to close a school and repurpose that building completely for something else, maybe with the district, maybe with somebody else. But in order to get there, the community would have to make some significant investment. I think, like Heath said, the work that has been done, a lot went into looking at that K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. Certainly you can do that again if you want to pursue that again. Then probably if you get back there or you take that recommendation, the big question is 2 middle schools or 3. The nice thing about the numbers, you see there wasn't a significant difference. One of those approaches didn't cost $10 or $20 million more than the other. So that's maybe really good news, because then it's probably the factors that we should be looking at that really help us make that decision. And that is, what's best for the kids in that school. It's not a matter of we're making that choice because of dollars. I mean, we want to be sensitive to the costs, but that probably isn't a make or break amount. I think there was maybe $3 million difference, which granted is a lot of money, but in a facility that you're going to hopefully get 80 years life out of, that's not a tremendous amount when you spread that over time. So, as he said, we want you to have this. 3 new board members may not have heard much of this before, so we kind of wanted people to know the history, and then as you move forward with what your next 5-year strategic plan will be, this may be a priority or it may not, but at least now you have the information. We're not asking for any action. We're not recommending a $50 million bond issue here or anything like that. We just want people to understand, in order to do this, it's going to probably take a bond level investment if we really want to change the configuration going forward.
It's so prudent to sort of prepare ourselves for opportunities that may present themselves. And infrastructure development or maintenance or sort of a vision to chase is not a bad idea at all. And that's sort of what you all have provided in going through that process. It makes me also want to ask, the dumb questions, because I don't know on some of the government infrastructure money that's out there, not Spark per se, but others, to what extent there might be opportunities that present themselves for affordable investments, public investments. So that's what I like about what you all have done and what we've done as a district, to position ourselves for this kind of thinking. it's certainly expensive right now. And if you've looked at all and the difference in prices from 2 years ago to now, it's significant. But there's something to be said for some thinking of updating the numbers just to update ourselves for readiness for any opportunities that present. Or, heaven forbid, we have 1 or 2 schools where something happens and we've just got to make some hard decisions, and at least we can have it in a context of a long-term vision.
Great point. And Heath mentioned 2 things you need to keep in mind. There's actually 2 different laws that apply. There's a bond cap law that was passed, it was after our bond in 2008, and I want to say in the 2015 range. And the state will not provide state aid for any bonds over what they were currently doing at that point in time. So as some districts' bond projects retire and that state aid becomes available, you have to, there's an order that you have to get in line to make sure that our district would be eligible for a piece of that state aid that's available. So this isn't something that you would want to talk about in April and not think about that and just put a bond on the ballot for August. It'll require some planning ahead. The bond companies are good at that. They know who's talking about bonds, but it's a consideration that there will be a timing issue with that. The other one is the amount of state aid, and as Heath explained, the law that was passed in 2015. If people remember when we publicized the Garden City High School project, it was 36%. We thought we were going to get 36% of that reimbursed, that cost reimbursed from the state. Currently, it's about 54%, I believe. Because over time, our enrollment changed, our population changed, our poverty levels changed, and that number has went up.
Our number
locally. That's unique to every district, okay? But in 2015, the state changed the law, and they basically put Fort Leavenworth in the calculation. Well, Fort Leavenworth has very little, almost zero assessed valuation because it's all federal property. And everything on the base is federal property. So I think there's a Burger King that maybe has some local assessed valuation. It really skews the formula that they use. In addition to that, Fort Leavenworth will never pass a bond issue because when they build a school, the federal government builds it. So it will never go to their local taxpayers for a project like that. So it really doesn't make any sense to have them included in the formula, in the calculation. What we've been told is the difference for us is right now under the law that's in effect, Garden City would qualify for 24% of state aid. If Fort Leavenworth comes out of the equation, that goes up to like 49 or 50%. Well, that's a significant difference. That's twice as much that the state would pay in that our local taxpayers would not have to come up with locally in order to make our bond payments. So there's also a timing issue with that. There was legislation out there last year, didn't pass. There's a bill out there this year. It's still alive. There's a lot of people trying to push that, get that to pass, but it's still a question mark whether or not it will pass or not. So there's a couple of timing issues that will factor into this for the board to think about going forward as well. And so a lot of moving parts to put together if ultimately you want to pursue a project.
One of the things that I'm wondering about, I guess, in your presentation, and it's a very good one, thank you for that, is the tool that the team put together here. 2 years old. Surely it can't take too much cost to update that.
So yeah, that's complete credit goes to Nick and Stuart Nelson, Nick Nemechek and Stuart Nelson. They created that for us to be able to play around with it, and that's their tool, and they provided the proposed numbers at the time. If you want to do a secure entrance for this building, click, and there's your magic number. That's the estimate. So again, I mean, if the board is considering doing that, he could probably tell you, you worked with this group in 2020, and so now knowing the forecast of costs, what's the increase from a $65 million bond in 2020 to what the same idea would cost us currently? And he could probably give you a range, but they would be the ones to go through and update that sheet. But it really is a dynamite tool. The other great thing about them is they have the drafting knowledge. They can manipulate things. They have ideas of where the storm shelters could be placed and tied into the existing building. I don't know if Stuart's still working or not, but you know, he's got all of that history. Like my familiarity was VO at the time when I was there. It was actually designed that you could have flipped that school and rebuilt a whole nother section in the area that we had at the time. So he has that working knowledge too of all of our facilities.
Well, the question fundamentally is, why wouldn't we, I mean, first of all, do we have the kind of money, and that's my sense is it wouldn't take much to update it. And then the question to the board would be, do we pull the trigger or not?
I think
it's a what-if tool that's out of date.
Yeah, I mean, the board would have to decide if you're even interested in pursuing that. I mean, again, lots of factors, you know, what is enrollment doing, of course, costs. Is it something that you're interested in pursuing? But that would be a first step, certainly, to do.
We can talk to them and find out what it would take. And at a minimum, I think they could probably just apply a percentage to the total cost.
Mm-hmm.
If you want it really ballpark, but if you want them to get a little more granular, then I don't think it would be incredibly costly. Because they're doing most of that on
I just hate to see us go another 2 to 3 years, and a couple of resources there are permanently in the Bahamas or whatever, and now you've got to really start over from something much less.
Stuart did get Nick involved in the process with us, and so that's been valuable. He's on our long-range facilities plan as well, our planning committee.
I wonder if this is something we could look at adding to a board retreat to have some more discussion. I'm not sure when we're having it, when our next one would be, but then we'd also need to know what we want completed, if we need that before we had that discussion, or if it was something we could just go into more detail.
I think you have a retreat scheduled in June, and we could find out if they have, and that might be that and other stuff, but that might be a good starting point to be able to, for the board to interact with that tool a little bit and look at what would some of the costs be, and just to.
And the reason I bring that up so energetically is that we've spent a lot of time in the past as a board talking about our current configuration, and we've gotten a lot of feedback about what works and what doesn't, and so it's not going away. So it's just something I think it's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right. You all are stuck listening to me again tonight. We just wanted to go over some changes that we've got that are happening with our TKI program. TKI stands for Transitional Kindergarten, and
Integrated, right?
what's that?
Integrated?
Yeah. And so we've seen some, to give you a little history of what TKI is. TKI is a mandatory 2-year program for our kiddos that are on IEPs, and it is a more restrictive setting than it would be if our kiddos went to their home school and they were in a regular kindergarten class and they would get CWC and maybe some pull-out resource support. So it would be a little bit more restrictive than that. Really the focus has been on our students that are what we would consider developmental delay. Developmental delay is a label that our students can carry until they turn 10. And basically that just means that they're showing a delay in one of the developmental areas that we measure. And so when they turn 10, we would either look at dismissal from special education or look at giving them a different label like learning disabled or something like that. The students are in the reading and the math block the entire day, so they spend most of their morning in the general kindergarten classroom, and then in the afternoon they would go into Miss Amanda's room. Oh, I didn't introduce you guys, I'm sorry. So we had a committee that we put together when we looked at this, and the whole committee is not here, but Amanda Miner is our TKI teacher that we have currently, and then Melanie Garrison is our early childhood coordinator, and Tammy Moore is our elementary coordinator. And so we had a group of the four of us, and then we had some kindergarten teachers, some support staff, and then administrators that kind of looked at that, and then some folks from Garfield as well to look at this as we kind of looked at the changes that we're going to go over with you all. So they spend their whole morning in the reading and the math blocks in the regular kindergarten classroom, and in the afternoon they're in Amanda's room where they work specifically on the goals that are connected to their IEPs. So that's kind of what TKI looks like. So that's what it looks like year one. Then year two, they would go back to their home school, whether that be wherever that be in Garden City, and they would be enrolled in just regular kindergarten, and they would do another year of kindergarten where it's a lot less restrictive, and they're probably going to have a lot less support. And so the whole goal on that is we're really looking at kiddos that we just think they need a little bit more time. Time is really the thing that we're predicting that they need, and hopefully through that extra time, they're going to be able to be successful in the kindergarten classroom. What did I just do? There we go. So Mel, do you kind of want to go over, explain the process?
Absolutely. So over the summer, we started working on the Kindergarten Readiness Star rubric, and one of the things that we noticed in the qualifying questions is a question that indicated, are our children in a one-year kindergarten program, or is there like an extra 2-year kindergarten program? If we answered the question yes, then that meant that our kids were all going to a one-year kindergarten program, regardless of what kind of kindergarten setting they were going into. And currently in Garden City, we have 2 programs that are actually a 2-year kindergarten program, so we were unable to pass the qualifiers, because in order to pass the qualifiers, you have to have yes on everything. So that kind of brought us to looking at our TKI program to see how we can make some changes to then get past those qualifiers to then be able to fill out the rubric for the Kindergarten Readiness Star.
And I will say that I think, and Dr. Carlin and I have talked about this a little bit, and Steve, you know more than I do, so if I'm speaking incorrectly, correct me, but my understanding is I think that the STAR recognition is something that we're in the process of applying for now to get like extra recognition from the state as a district. But I think moving forward, that's probably going to be connected to accreditation, and it's something that we're going to have to look at a little bit more seriously kind of moving forward. Am I correct, Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm processing here the language or the terms. But as I understand it, you basically are describing TKI was sort of a 2-year process.
Yes, sir.
To get them through kindergarten.
Correct.
And the state's saying that's too restrictive.
That's not best practice to have to make it a mandatory 2-year program.
So we got to do something else.
We got to do something different. Correct.
Yeah, we can't really predict, because when they're at preschool and we're getting ready to do those kindergarten transitions, we're telling parents that they'll have to be in kindergarten for 2 years basically, and we don't have a crystal ball to just say, oh yeah, that's exactly what they need. You know, sometimes they might only need 1 year, and then they're ready for that first grade. So,
If I remember when we first started this, the challenge was we have such a diversity of young ones, and there's such a challenge at the kindergarten level to address all of that. And so we were trying to come up with something in the middle.
Yeah, and really TKI, if you look at like our special education continuum, you know, from least restrictive to most restrictive, I think TKI would be right in the middle. So you have, you know, your gen ed kindergarten, and maybe you've got some CWC or some resource support, and then I think TKI falls there, and then you move into self-contained kindergarten, and then you move into our functional classrooms or our RISE rooms. And so that's kind of the continuum that you follow. So So what we are recommending, what we come up with, our plan was progressive kindergarten. We're gonna change the name to PKI instead of TKI, progressive kindergarten. And so basically what that will be, we'll set up the services. So instead of it being a two-year commitment for them, it will just be a one-year commitment. But in order to meet some of those developmental needs that our kiddos are gonna have, we would really front load the services at the beginning of the year. And so still gonna be the same process. It'll be an IEP team decision for them to go into Amanda's program to be in the progressive kindergarten classroom. But the first 9 weeks of school, they're gonna be with Amanda, and Amanda will do all of their core instruction. The only time that they'll leave Amanda's room is when they go to specials, science, music, PE, art, things like that, library. They'll leave her room, but the rest of the time she'll be required to do all of the core instruction in her classroom. Gradually releasing that, so after 9 weeks, then we will open it up so that they'll go to one block in the kindergarten classroom. So that I think we decided we were going to do reading first, right? So they'll go to reading after the first 9 weeks. They'll go to reading, and and then the rest of the day they'll be with Amanda still. And then we're gonna after Christmas, then we'll increase that to where they'll go to math and reading in the gen ed classroom, and then they'll go back to Amanda for the rest of their day. So that when we get to this time, when we're getting close to spring break, when the kiddos come back from spring break, they'll be in the kindergarten classroom the entire day with minimal supports. That's kind of our hope, and making that a one-year program. Now, that's not to say that we can't have kids go 2 years. But what that means is we're not predetermining, and we're not saying that every kid that's in that program is gonna be in a 2-year commitment. We're gonna look at those kids individually. We're gonna follow the kindergarten retention rubric just like we would for any other kiddo to determine if that's appropriate for them.
So if they need that extra year, then
They would get,
opportunities.
yeah, we would have that opportunity. But we're not making a blanket statement and saying that every kiddo in there. Because, when I was at Garfield, we would always have the parents, that was a big conversation when they went to TKI, and our self-contained kindergarten classroom was a 2-year program as well. And so we're gonna change that too, but that's a little bit easier to change than Amanda's, because we don't have other parties working with that. But they signed paperwork, saying the parents would sign off saying that they understood that was a 2-year commitment, so that they knew that they were getting into a 2-year program. We won't do that anymore. It'll be based solely on the kindergarten rubric, and we'll look at it that way. And I think it'll work. We talked about maybe modifying the rubric for our kiddos because they are on IEPs, and maybe we need to look at it differently. But Amanda really feels like, if we're doing what we're doing, they should be able to pass the rubric. And a lot of our kids this year are already doing that, and so we've already dismissed a couple of kids actually from TKI this year. So I think we're gonna have our growing pains. It's not gonna work perfectly anytime you have changes like this. But I think we've got a good foundation, and there's a lot of folks that have had a lot of good ideas. So I think this will probably work well. Anything else that I need to add there, girls?
No.
Okay, I did it again. So some of the considerations that we talked about when the IEP is written, one of the things that I didn't want to have is if we're looking at doing our change of services every 9 weeks, I didn't want to have an IEP meeting every 9 weeks, because that would be a quick way to get lynched by some SPED staff on my part. And so we're gonna try to write that with the services the way they are, and then if we need to make changes down the road, we can make those changes as we kind of move forward. Amanda's gonna have to have an IEP meeting throughout the year at some point for her kiddos. And so when we get to the point where we're at this point in the year and we're talking about services for the rest of this year and next year, that'll be the opportunity where she can really look at that last 9 weeks of school. How much support do they really need? And we can really individualize that for those kiddos at that time for that last 9 weeks. And so we've kind of she's kind of been working on a schedule, and so that we'll be able to fill out the minutes and have that kind of pre-done at the beginning of the year. One of the other things that we talked about that's going to be really, really important is if Amanda's doing all of the teaching at the beginning, and then the kids are going to transition into the regular kindergarten classroom, she's got to be at the same place that they're at all the time. So it's going to be really important that they're doing a lot of planning together, that they're following the same pacing guide, that they're in the progression with the lessons at the same time, so that when they leave Amanda's room to go into the general ed classroom, they're on the same lesson, so we don't have any holes that we've got to fill for our kiddos. We don't want to put any more barriers in front of them than the ones that they already have in front of them. One of the things that we talked about is, and I think this is just something that's good practice, but we really need to be mindful of the accommodations that our kiddos are gonna need as they go into that, because they're not gonna have that support from Amanda like they typically have had in the past. And so making sure that we're intentional at looking at our accommodations and making sure that we have the supports in place for our kiddos to be successful in that classroom. And then the last thing that we talked about is limiting the classroom to five kiddos per classroom. So right now, Florence Wilson has 3 kindergarten sections, and so each, or 4, but so we would limit that number of kiddos that we would go in there to 15 would be the max that Amanda would have. She would only support 3 of the classrooms. One of the classrooms, the other classroom is supported by the self-contained classroom that's over there. So her kids only go into 3 rooms. And so we would cap that classroom at 15, 5 in each kindergarten classroom would be what that would look like.
So that's the story right there, right? In other words, I mean, you already did amazing things with these kids over 2 years.
Right.
But now you're scrunching it into 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And with some adjustments, I'm sure, and all of that. But how do you even do that? Well, apparently, one way you do that is you limit the class size.
Which we've done in the past. We've always done that, Mark.
And like this year, I started out with 11 kids, and 7, 8 maybe of those 11 are going to pass the kindergarten rubric and would be able to move to first grade if parents wanted them to.
And so, I guess that's an important thing to bring up too. One of the things that we talked about as we're making this change, I don't think it's fair to the parents to change the rules in the middle of the game. So we've already told them that it's a 2-year program, but we're gonna give the parents the option. If they feel like their kiddos met the rubric and they want them to go on, then we'll let them go on to first grade. But if they feel like they would like to have them there for another year, we're gonna honor that because that's what we told the parents that we would do. And so they'll be able to keep them the second year if that's what they wanna do.
And the other thing I would say, I don't know you've got more details, I apologize, but we've talked about this so much, trying to get kids kindergarten ready and then get them first grade ready, and and so that they're off and they've got they're well trained as they get into second grade, basically.
Right.
And because in the past when they weren't, it was on that classroom teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes a little bit from him or her for the rest of the class to try to get that one student what that student needs. And so that was all of this thinking, as I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're continuing to innovate, sounds to me like, and maybe it's okay, maybe it was swung way over this way for some kids having that mandatory 2-year. But I'm just sitting here in awe of how you're gonna get this done, given that the population is still there. And as I understand it, maybe in early childhood, we continue to get big challenges through the door.
Yeah, I think, and Mel can probably speak to the challenges at Garfield, but from what I've seen, I think our biggest challenges are really, really significant kids. The kids that are going into our RISE room that have really significant needs. When I was at Garfield as the principal, Melanie was our RISE room teacher, and so she had a classroom of between 8 and 10 in the morning and 8 and 10 in the afternoon. We've got 2 RISE rooms over there now with 8 to 10 in the morning and the afternoon, and look at having a 3rd next year. And just the kiddos that are coming to us with severe needs, that are nonverbal, that have very limited language, that have pretty significant other issues going along with that. I mean, that's, to me, that's where our biggest challenge is going.
And we're also seeing an increase in students that have limited vocabulary. So a child that's 3 should have at least 500 words, and a lot of our kids coming in have 50 or less words right now. So trying to build their vocabularies is a really big piece of what we're doing right now at Garfield.
So the plan for next year is, like I said, the first 9 weeks, the students will be with Amanda pretty much the whole day. The second 9 weeks, they'll be with Amanda and then go to the reading block. And then the third 9 weeks, they will go to both reading and math and be with Amanda the rest of the day. And then the fourth 9 weeks, they're going to be full-time in kindergarten. And during those 9 weeks, Amanda will do the CWC and resource time, just like a regular CWC resource teacher would do in the buildings for those kindergarten kiddos. And we'll kind of look at what those needs need to be individually based on the needs of the kiddo.
I just want to make sure that I have it right. CWC is class within.
Class within class, yes ma'am, I'm sorry.
The acronym is.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, class within a class. So, some of the information that we felt like was going to be important for the early childhood teachers as they planned to look at transitions, because this is the time of year when transition staffing start happening as we're looking at those kiddos leaving Garfield and going into kindergarten and whatever program that kindergarten looks like. What does that mean? And so this is just kind of a list of things that the committee kind of put together to help those teachers at Garfield identify whether those kiddos might be a good fit for the program. So are they able to recognize their name, and can they write their name with a model? Are they able to recognize their colors and their shapes? You know, just basic things that you would hope your kiddos know. And so that's just kind of a list that we put together to share with the teachers. And Melanie's already started sharing information with Garfield as we look at that. So this is how we're going to measure success. Obviously, this is a big change. And I will say, before TKI, we had what was called DKI, which was Developmental Kindergarten Interrelated. And that was back in the days of when we had Kinder Prep. We still had Kinder Prep programs. And so basically what that looked like is the SPED teacher and the Kinder Prep teacher team taught that program. And those kiddos the teachers were together. So you had a group of general education students that were in Kinder Prep, and you had a group of students on IEPs that were in developmental kindergarten together. And they did that for half a day program, and then they went on to whatever kindergarten program there was. When Kinder Prep went away 15, 16 years ago, we had to change that program, and so then that's when it became TKI. And so that happened. I was still teaching at Florenceville, so when that happened, so that had to be about 16, 17 years ago, I think, is when we changed from DKI to TKI. So ways that we're going to look at measuring the success of the program. The first is looking at their IEP goals. Have the kiddos made their goals in their IEP? And if they've made their goals, then we've done what we needed to do. Another thing would be to look at their retention rubrics, and what are we seeing on Amanda's retention rubrics from her class versus the other kindergarten classrooms? Are we seeing a difference there, and are we making the growth there that we want to? And then I think the other thing is how many of those kiddos that are with Amanda in this program are we retaining for a second year of kindergarten? That'll give us an idea of how successful we are. And then lastly, and this is going to be something that's going to take us some time to get to this data because they're going to have to turn 10, but as these kiddos get older and they get to the age 10, how many of these kiddos are we seeing? Because I always feel like our kids that are developmentally delayed, our goal for those kiddos is to get them off of an IEP before they turn 10. So how many of our kiddos that are coming to Amanda are we still seeing in special education after their 10th birthday? I think this is a good way for us to kind of measure the success of the program and gives us some good data. Questions?
Just a quick one.
It's all right.
So how you measure success on the back end in part depends on how you're able to identify candidates on the front side.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you doing that?
I think a lot of that, and Amanda, do you want to speak to some of that, and Melanie? But I think a lot of that is we've got to talk to our teachers about what these different programs are. Melanie does a really good job of.
Yeah, so we do PLCs, early childhood PLCs, once a month, and so we go over all the different kindergarten options, what they all look like, even down to like who teaches them, how to get a hold of them, and then we talk about what does a student look like in each program. This year with progressive kindergarten, we've had some more talks just on what does it look like, what is the program going to feel like next year, and then the teachers from there can ask questions as needed. So.
And we've talked about having Amanda, because it is different, having Amanda go over to Garfield at a PLC or at a faculty meeting and talking with the teachers, because this is going to be different. And I think the first couple of years it's going to be a little different, and we're going to have to work through some of the growing pains.
The early childhood teachers also fill out a referral form that just kind of gives me information on the kid. And so I can look at that, and if they have been in early childhood for 3 years and they've had Russell, there are just a whole bunch of other things that I look at to see if I feel that they would be a good candidate. It's kind of hard to explain, but
Well, the reason why I ask that is that you've got incredible expertise here, you know, historically.
Sure.
And so there's that judgment. On the backside, you're talking about measuring success, but ultimately you're running right into the kindergarten rubric. I mean, first grade ready rubric. And so, you know, we're not always gonna have Amanda. I hope we have her for a long time, but.
Right.
And the team, but there's no rubric.
And I think too, that's a good point too, Mark. I think as the teachers are looking at and trying to make those decisions, they're talking to their service providers, they're talking to their OTs and their speech pathologists, and they should be getting information from them. I think we talk to the school psychologists to see what they think, and if there's questions and we're not sure, they'll ask for people to go in and do some observations on kids to help them to give recommendations. The one thing I will say that I think is good about special education, you know, it's not a perfect science, and we're making our best guess with what we think is going to work based on the information that we have in front of us and the data that we have. But the great thing about that is if we put the kid on a program and that's not the right fit, all we have to do is have another meeting and move them somewhere else. I mean, and that's one thing that I think will be beneficial with the change in Amanda's program that we've not been able to do because it's been a little harder, is if we've got a kiddo that we move into a gen ed classroom and they're not doing so well, we can have another meeting and we can move those kiddos to Amanda, you know, 5-6 weeks into kindergarten, we can move them to her so that they're getting extra support, where it was a little harder to do that when it was a 2-year program, you know. So I think it gives us a little bit more flexibility to be a little bit more fluid with our services too. So that part I'm excited about.
And on the flip side of that, it's also hard for us to decide.
Right.
It's a mandatory 2-year program, but yet this kid doesn't qualify for special education anymore in December. So what do we do now? Do we make them do a second semester of kindergarten and then a whole nother year, even though they don't qualify for special education anymore? Or do we move them to first grade? So that was something we had to.
I think the mandatory retention has created a lot of issues for us in a lot of areas, and so I think this will help clean some of that up. I think we're gonna, like I said, I think we're gonna have some growing pains and some things that we haven't thought about, but I was really pleased with the committee. I think they did a good job of really looking at everything and coming up with it, so.
It's just a question about, and it doesn't sound like this. The more we talk, it sounds like it's a little bit different in these younger years, and now this will even make that more so with the flexibility back and forth, because, you know, when they get a little older, we talk about like not wanting to retain and things like this. And I guess on the front end of this, I was a little nervous, like, does this make it like more intensive, and does it make it more where we don't want to hold these kids back? You know, I worry about that. They're so little, some of these kiddos, and we, you know, there was that year or two where we heard we need to have our kids play learning, play, you know, that was like the big thing.
Right.
So that was kind of my question with this, you know, do you feel like the requirements are making it where it's like more intensive for the kids to make, that way they can mainstream in a maybe better amount of time, or for the age wise, or does that make sense?
I think kindergarten is hard in general now compared to what it was like when I was in kindergarten. I mean, I think the expectations of our kiddos is much more, the rigor that we expect of our kiddos is much higher than it ever was when I was in school. But I don't know that we've necessarily amped up the expectations of those kiddos, because if they do need that second year, we're going to give it to them. But what I do think we're able to do now is we're not holding those kiddos back that we're ready to go on. And I think to me, that's the important piece is, you know, just like Amanda said, she's got kiddos that have already passed the retention rubric. Well, why are we having them go to another year of kindergarten? That just seems silly to me. And so we do need to be pushing those kiddos on and letting them go on.
And that's something that I can do in my room also, is I have a little more flexibility to do more hands-on manipulatives, fun activities, and still get them to where they need to be.
I just think that like we felt more pressure, kind of, you know, because we want to qualify for these programs, so we're kind of making the changes that we
Yeah. Yes. My answer would be yes, I do.
You wanna make sure we.
But I also think, I think one of the things that we learned about this, and Amanda and I talked about this, you know, we went to TKI 15 years ago. To my knowledge, we've not looked at this program in 15, 16 years. I mean, I think this did make us do that. I mean, I think we need to be doing those things. We need to be looking at our programs and talking about, is this still working? And I think if you look at a lot of the research that's out there now and a lot of the best practices, retention is not as popular as it once was. And I think when you do use retention, it should be used on a case-by-case basis and not just a broad stroke like what we've done in the past with it. So I think that's good. Yeah, I do feel pressure. I mean, I think we do need to make some changes, but I think it's been good. I mean, I think the outcome that we've had is going to be better for our kiddos, because I think it's going to give them an opportunity to go on if they're ready, and if they're not ready, we're gonna keep them for another year, and we can look at doing something different with them that way. So that's the part I like and that's really what we should be doing in special education anyway. Everything we do in special education should be, that's why they call it an individualized education plan. And predetermining is a really bad word that we don't like to use in SPED. That gets you in a lot of trouble when you've made up your decision on the kiddo before you've even sit down and looked at the data. Well, that's kind of what we're doing when we're saying that they've got to go to kindergarten for 2 years. We're doing a lot of predetermining there that's not fair to that kiddo.
Thank you.
I just want to clear up one thing, and that's thank you for that last comment. That's a perfect segue. So the fact that the star recognition thing was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back here and calling this to our attention. Mr. Guyman's been hearing for years from the state about this. I don't want people thinking that we're looking at these changes because we're concerned about whether or not we get that recognition. We're making these changes because all of these things kind of added up, and we said, hey, it's been 15 years since we've really looked at how effective this is, but our goal all along here has been to have services that are the most appropriate for kids. And I really applaud the team for diving into that, and that's something we do, you know, and we're not asking the board to approve this, we're sharing this with you. This is a programmatic change that Mr. Guyman and his folks make in a number of areas all the time. And Glenda, through her department, we do those things all the time in applying best practices to what's gonna work the best for our kids. So huge kudos to the teachers and the committee that are diving into this, because it's tough. It's, you know, and the fact that they've identified some things they can look at to monitor, will these changes really make an impact? That's exactly what we should be doing. So thank you for all your work on it. But I didn't want people thinking that this is the motive behind this is because we are getting the recognition over what's best for kids, and it's the exact opposite of that.
Thank you very much.
My goal here is to one day put this part of my job out of commission. But I think we've got another good report for you tonight.
So this will be your final presentation?
Oh, I wish. I wish. So far, so good, Heath. Yeah. So you just have to click the hot link, I hope. At least I did earlier. I took your advice.
Up there for a second.
Here it is. There it is.
Is that
Yep.
the first one?
Yep, sure is. So Finney County positive cases by week. You can see that number is staying down where we'd like it to stay, 19.
for the week ending in March 4th. And again, our positivity rate is 0. So again, remember that is by cases that are tested at the health department. So we do have, because I was asked that question earlier, but we have 19 positive cases, but those were very possibly tested at other places. Genesis here, the walk-in clinics, some of those places. So. All right, local hospital COVID patients is also down. So the average daily patient in ICU is 5. And I understand, Dr. Cronin, we have a new update from the hospital that there are no COVID patients currently. Is that correct?
Yeah, I got an email today that they are going back to their normal operations. And last week I got an email that I'm not sure I completely understood, that they would only send updates on days that they had patients. So I assume that means that the days that I haven't got one since, an updated spreadsheet, that they've had no patients, but I haven't confirmed that with them. But the numbers are way, way, way down.
All right, so these are absences by the week. No, I'm sorry, positive student tests, that's what we are. So we had 1 last week, 1 positive student. And then we have absences by the week. So you can see that, whoop.
Sorry.
That's okay, Heath. So the blue line is COVID, and the orange, yellow, whatever color that is, goldenrod, is all absences. So again, our COVID line is staying down. Number of students sent home with symptoms. So last week we averaged 1 a day, and I will tell you today we had 0. 0 students sent home with symptoms. So.
Does that mean the flu's starting to go away too?
Well, she had quite a few last week that were flu, but she only had 1 positive flu today. So I'm hopeful that maybe that's kind of going away too.
We had 65 requests for leave last Friday, so I wouldn't say it's completely gone.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah. Student weekly attendance is just up just a little bit from where it was before, so we'll take it. We want to get back up to that 90 range. And this is what Heath was talking about. So this is staff absences. So can you scroll just a little bit more, Heath? There we go. So the blue is staff absences by all, that's all staff. So then the next one, the gold, is staff absences that are COVID, and then this gray is just classroom staff. So this is, the top one is all staff, so that's plant facilities, nutrition, all of those, and then this is just classroom. And yep.
Are those just sick days? It doesn't include personal days or on the absences?
It's we know that they've had COVID or they're out for COVID.
No, I just meant absences in general.
The top is absences, any absences.
Okay, so that can include
and the
the
same with the
personal.
gray is any absences, and then COVID related on the orange, brownish.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went brown. Okay.
It's golden brown. It does look golden brown.
Yeah, it's brown. I'm gonna go Buffs.
All right, go ahead. Positive staff, we had 3 last week. Those were all at one school. So, and that school is yellow. I will tell you that those particular staff are all back, so their quarantine has expired. However, the building is remaining yellow because of that incubation period of 14 days where other people could still become positive. Substitute data, last week 44 requests, average 34 fill rate, so not too bad. Students quarantined, we had 9 average last week. So again, that number's going down.
And those are still being issued by the health department? How is that working?
That is, so if a student is quarantined, that is a member of their family is positive, and the health department is taking care of that. So we're not quarantining anybody,
Right,
we're not doing that close
I just wanted
contact,
to
yeah.
clarify.
Uh-huh. So since the last board meeting, updated guidance, we were told that we should still be continuing that current practice with contact tracing. So that means we're not doing that. So that means the masks are optional for everybody. We are still seeing some kids with masks, and we do have that if they were positive, then they can come back at 5 days and wear a mask for 5 days. However, with the low numbers, we're not, it's people are choosing to wear a mask for personal reasons. Masks are no longer required in district transportation vehicles, so that was a change last week that I think made a lot of folks happy. We have 2 buildings that are yellow, Kenneth Henderson and VO. So, and everybody else is green. Questions? Yeah.
Good news.
Yeah.
Are we still requiring the staff to fill out the questionnaire in the mornings, or
Yes.
is that something we need to continue to do, or can we look at that, or?
I think it's good for discussion, and it helps the nurses identify, especially students. The staff, I think the same thing. It just keeps it in people's minds that, if you have a symptom, you probably should stay home. And that's, every once in a while, we see somebody that has had symptoms and thought, oh, it's allergies. Well, let's check it out and make sure, instead of maybe exposing several people to COVID. So.
Have you got any feedback from staff on?
No. We've had no questions about it, let me put it that way, so.
Is that something, I guess staff-wise, and I'm thinking contract negotiations coming up, those types of health questions that there might be a concern that that's continued to be asked if there's not that high risk, that it's more of an invasion of privacy thing to be required? I'm just trying to prepare myself if something like that comes up.
So I did ask Michelle about like HIPAA regulations and things like that, and she said because it's only going to the nurse and not out everywhere, so it's one person saying, how are you feeling?
Right.
And then when COVID came about, that gave us that leeway to ask those questions, I guess. The law was changed, or the guidance was changed on that so that we can ask those questions, and it does go just to that building's nurse, so.
And is our, I don't know if policy is the right word, but are we requiring that for every staff member to do that and every student to do that? It's not an optional thing.
Right.
They got as part of our plan, our approved plan at the beginning of the year.
And I think that was a good question to bring up because we're lifting some of those other mandatory requirements. I think it's something to keep on the forefront that maybe we need to consider making that an optional. I think there might still, ones that want it filled out, I just struggle with.
If there's not a COVID issue, I don't know that we need that information.
So like after spring break?
I don't, it was kind of like with the transportation and the masks on that, I wondered if it was something that was just gonna, and that was at the federal level, not here, but it was something that they were just going to keep and just not really talk about it anymore when there were still concerns about it. I'm not against the questionnaires, I'm just concerned about the requiring it because we have nurses, but we're not a health facility. Is that really our place to continue to do that if the risk isn't there?
Yeah, I see advantages to it just from what Glenda talked about is it just keeps it in the forefront of people's mind. We don't want people in the building when they're sick, things that they would have came to work for in the past. It could cause other people issues, and it is part of the board's plan. So to take that out, I think we have to change our plan.
I think that's something we should probably talk about. I agree. At least have conversation, maybe at the next meeting, or feel it's more urgent. It's whatever the board feels like. But I think we should have that discussion.
Who sets the agenda?
I don't know. Yeah, I'll make note of it if that's something you would like to see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Guess I'm in charge now. Stephanie's been helping me out and sent me a to-do list for tonight, so thank you for doing that. We are meeting with Gary on Wednesday in executive session to go over, and if I state this wrong, correct me, we're gonna go over the applications and then look at, who we'll interview and move forward to the schedules for the interviews. Some things we need to decide tonight is, our final interview questions, which, did you?
I emailed them out,
Yep.
and there's also a copy.
I must have missed those between that. Okay, okay. And then we need to discuss the interview day schedule, which, we have an example here what's been done in the past, and so we can discuss that and talk about some changes we wanna make. And did the ranking criteria one get to everybody? Is that one? I printed it out and I didn't have to make copies of that, so, yeah, that might be easier. Just a recommended one that we could use during our interviews is the way I understand it.
Just this?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess we'll go over, we have the interview questions first on the list. Did everyone get a chance to glance over those? I didn't, obviously, because I didn't know I got those tonight.
And it looks like we have folks to ask, we take
Right.
turns asking
Right.
interview questions.
And they're all ones that, we had looked at and suggested, like, these are the ones we like, and she narrowed it down for us.
She conducted the vote.
That's right. Help us out.
Okay.
And is that just something we discuss and say, yeah, we're good with that, or do we need to make motions on that, or how does that?
I think.
I'm looking
it's
at
just-
you, because you've done this before.
We just had a consensus. We
Okay.
didn't take any official action other than we are going to ask these interview
Okay.
questions.
Does anybody have concerns on those, or you good with those? I don't wanna rush you.
I'm good with them.
Okay.
So, are we limited, like, what if during conversation other things come up? Can just expand, or, like, other questions can be created? Or, I guess what I'm asking
Oh, go ahead with the question.
is, like, do these have to be approved, like, is it limited to just this?
Want my HR opinion?
Yeah.
Well, 21 is a lot, so you don't, I mean, I obviously wouldn't wanna be interviewed for 2 hours, but sometimes when you ask a question, you
might
and
get
they
clarified.
or if they answer something and then you're like, oh, that, maybe I need to have a different question, because that makes me think something.
I'm sure your consultant will give you advice on how to interview and go through that process, but typically, once you start asking a candidate questions, you have to ask the same questions all the way through.
Okay, so all 3 of them need to be the same questions to all 3, but, okay, I'll ask him that,
Yeah,
just to double check on that.
the way we did it before is just that what you would normally do with a simple question is ask the question, if they say something unusual, the Ferdbers, you use that in a sentence and you go, what does that mean? Well, you just ask some clarifying questions, and that's pretty normal. And that really isn't betraying any process there, as long as you stick to the questions. It seems like when we did it last time, we even had a question that we skipped and we sort of said, yeah, it's sort of an extra question and we don't need to ask it. The main thing is we ask the same questions to every interviewee. And, yeah,
popular ones or anything like that.
She cut them all up and drew them out of a hat.
I was just wondering, because if you start here on everybody, but there was some that got more votes than others, then we may miss some that are back here. I mean, unless we're gonna ask every single one of these. It'd be good to know, like, maybe the top 5, or I don't know, top 10 vote getters, because then we make sure those are definitely first at the top.
I assumed we were gonna try to ask all of those, because that's why we narrowed them down, but yeah, there might be some.
I was just thinking, you have a chatty cat, how long are you gonna go? If
Right.
Somebody's really chatty.
That's
I mean,
true.
Right. I think you figure that out when you tour them around during the day, and what kind of personality they have and all of that. I look forward to that debriefing time with our consultant.
Okay, next up we have the interview day schedule. This is just an example, kind of the one we used in the past. I'm assuming if you felt like we want to choose different schools for them to tour, we can do that. We also, Dana and I met with building leadership, some principals last week, and I did give you a copy of those notes. You don't have to read through them all now, we just wanted you to be included in the discussion. It should be a hard copy, because she made copies. It's yeah, they're just all stapled together, so I guess the schedule's on the front. But why I bring that up now is one thing that we discussed, that Dana kind of led the conversation on, so I may let her expand on it, was adding a presentation by the candidate during the day. And we discussed giving them each the same topic or to present on, or perhaps give them a couple choices.
I think we narrowed it down to 3.
I don't know.
I'll look at my notes.
Yeah, I don't know if I got just the 3 in there. So if we're interested in adding that presentation in there, it's finding a time to do that in the schedule. There was also brought up perhaps trying to, I guess it was the city that had done it where there were more than one candidate during a day, so they kind of staggered the tours and the other events throughout the day, so more than one candidate was here on that day.
So if you looked at the forward that I sent, or had Stephanie send, and it shows it, did you guys get a chance to see the sample schedule that Jennifer gave? Okay, I know, there's so much, but it does have, it's all in one day and then it staggers everything. One of the staff that attended the meeting had attended the presentation session. Was it for the chief of the fire?
Yeah, it was
fire
the chief of police.
Or chief of police,
Yeah.
okay. She had attended that and really liked that. The overall thing that stuck out to me is nobody really had a whole lot of experience being a part of the interviewing day or process, other than when they walked through the buildings, maybe they got to have some interaction, but so there was very little past experience from anybody. And then that came up, and they really liked the idea of having somebody present. They could choose one of the 3 issues, and again, maybe have like a mixed audience for those.
And they was the city staff?
This was all of the principals that we met with last week, so this was kind of the notes, and that was one thing that they thought was a really good idea, and that's part of the city's process when they hire some of the.
And then those watching would have an opportunity to fill out a type of survey or evaluation, just to give us their perspective on.
I think that's a good thing to have, to learn somebody's personality, how they present things, because you can inform themselves to interview questions, and it's something they're left on their own. They put a whole different view on someone.
And we're gonna review this with our consultant too.
Yeah, I believe so I wasn't sure exactly how much we had to have finalized tonight. If we just need to have an idea of what we'd like the interview schedule to be, and then he'll give us suggestions.
Yeah, I think this is ideal, it's sort of review,
Uh-huh.
you guys is thinking,
Uh-huh.
and
Well,
then
and
review it with him.
Okay.
It's not something that's not done. I talked to another superintendent in a different state, and they were asked to do a presentation at a district in Nebraska. So it's not something that's not done for superintendents, it's just not been done here.
Okay. And that meeting with Gary is when?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
So do you feel like that's something we need to try to fit in this schedule tonight, or present it to him on Wednesday and we can go from there to finalize that?
I'd be for the latter.
Okay.
I mean, you say present to him, I mean, it's a review with him, it's a collaboration.
I'll change it to review. We present it and then we review, I guess.
But I just maybe need to clarify, because I think it's always good to make sure, but at the same time, it's something that I think that the principals, the leadership felt really strongly about, and I do too. I don't necessarily think it needs approval if we all feel that it's something that we think would be good to happen. This is a really important position, and I think one of the things that came up a lot was communication skills, and this would be helpful in that area as well.
Well, the approval is the consensus of the board, that's nobody else.
Right.
I just hate to put too many things off, or like to have Gary go over it and approve it, rather than if it's something that we really want, then we ask him, how do we fit this in? Not, is this something that you're okay that we do, but rather, how do we fit it in? This is what
How
we
can
want.
we fit that in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe I missed, where are you thinking about putting it, because there's a lot here, so what would you take out? Necessary.
I didn't know, there's only an hour there. I didn't know if maybe we could fit it in that 4 to 5 slot, where part of it's presentation and part of it's reception. I haven't done this, so I don't know if that would make the reception part too short, because I feel like that's probably the same type of audience. Well, that's teachers and classified staff. I don't know.
I think you
Yeah.
could fit in with that.
The caution I would have there, just sort of first blush, is that this is we're being interviewed as well as interviewing. And I don't know that's a reception with teachers, classified
Right.
staff, and so I think that's a different kind of environment than a show us what you got.
Right. Yeah, so I'm not sure.
But at the same time, like, how much interaction, or how much can you really learn from a reception where they're expected to talk to, a room full of people? So if you get 5 minutes max with somebody, I would say that something like a presentation with questions and answers, something like that, gives you a lot more depth of information about a person than kind of like the fraternity sorority handshake kind of thing, where it's like, hey, how you know, where are you from, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and that was expressed to me by Jennifer Cunningham, who has been involved in the process. For such a big position, I just think a very quick meet and greet doesn't really give somebody like any kind of depth of information.
Is this presentation for the board, or is it for the community, I guess?
It would be a
Mix.
It would be a mix, so it'd be
A mix.
Yeah.
Another thing on this one is there was a 2-hour tour of the community. I just think there's ways to kind of maybe,
Pack more in.
right?
What if on the reception, if like we take the tour and make it an hour and a half and a break, and then adding 30 minutes to that reception and having the first 30 minutes be a presentation, and the last is reception?
Is everybody open to the presentation? I don't wanna force that. It's definitely something that the principals were on board with. They felt it was a good idea, and I like it, but it's like the discussion before,
Well,
we didn't really talk about.
I think the principals felt pretty strongly about it. I mean, it's gonna
gonna be someone they're gonna be working with closely, and that's, we need to respect that. If they're strong about it, we need to do that.
What about the lunch part? I mean, is the same people? What about the lunch part instead of the reception? I feel like the reception's more relaxed, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then see a lot of lunch and learns, right? So, I don't know. That might be
The reception's kind of toward the end of the day too, which I think it should be more relaxed setting. They're gonna have a pretty full day before.
I would agree.
So could it go, like you said, shorten the tour and put it in there between, I mean, after lunch?
What if you have it at 8 AM after
Previous to
meeting
lunch.
with building administrators, have it at 8:30 to 9 and just kind of bump everything to catch up. Do lunch at 12:30 rather than 12 and just do community tour 1 to 1:30 to 3.
Where are we doing when are we doing the interview?
Evening.
In the evening there?
Mhm.
Oh, there it is.
Can you share an example of like your thoughts on presentations?
So on the second page that Jennifer, on this little handout, these were the, when it said possible topics, and I think Jennifer highlighted the ones that probably got the most votes, is that what you did?
Yeah, we had those start, so I put them in bold, and I believe those were the top two. I didn't have a third one marked, but.
Okay, and we could just do two, I mean, these were some of the things that they felt were really important, or would be good topics. This isn't the important one, I mean, they were important topics, but I'm just saying, some of the other things that we talked about, like what they felt were, important issues in the district, but these are particularly for the presentation topics.
I think those two topics could be combined into one, actually. Into one presentation, you know.
I need a good wordsmith there.
I don't know, I think that they're kind of really, diversity is so big here, and it means a lot of different things, whereas hiring and, recruitment and retention is such a, like a national, not that diversity's not, but you know what I mean? They
Well, but
take it
I
in a
wonder if
national-
That would be for our area, we're so diverse, we'd have to recruit and retain the right people.
Right, and I
Yeah,
wonder if the
true.
culture and
I see where
the
you're
staff morale comes underneath there. And it talks about being tied with recruitment and retention, and I guess culture, I look at it as the culture of the district. It may not necessarily include cultural diversity,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of different meanings to that. Like we said, it's not just about race or their ethnic background, it's about,
Socioeconomics.
Yeah, all of
and
that.
Rural versus, yeah.
so when we
It's
say
so-
diversity, that was the discussion of so many different bullet points of diversity. My first instinct, I think it would be best to try to get them to all talk about the same topic, because it would be easier to compare.
And maybe we can say, your topic can be over anything, these are the points you need to touch on.
Or this is the main topic, and how you.
And that'll tell us too, how much research they've done in our area.
Right, that was something that was said too, it was brought up, like, how much research did they do, how, you know, heard that too.
I just know, personally for me, I feel like I would get a lot out of this presentation and what kind of asset they would be to the district versus just asking the interview questions.
And I think we need to leave it kind of, include these topics, but leave it open to how they present it and how, because that'll tell a lot about their leadership style, how something's presented and, communicated.
Yeah, and even just their thinking process,
Mhm.
how much outside the box or within. Or we could do literally just one, because it does incorporate so many things, and since we have to do all the same questions here, we could say, here's the topic, you choose how you're gonna.
Right. And I think, pick, whatever these top ones that were, this is things we would like for you to include or consider.
Well, I put in my notes to try to schedule the presentations
probably catch more people from the community, because that's a sometimes at the end of the day, people.
Afterward, and I could get it over with too. I know the superintendent I talked to was like, I was stressed about it, I was like pretty nervous about it, and then we didn't end up doing it, and then I was like kind of upset, because I had put a lot of effort into it.
Well, and they're fresh and.
Right.
Yeah.
And I perceive we would have that in here, so it's not gonna be like it's hundreds of people, it's a.
I know the city of Van at the Bennett Center.
Did you attend like Jackie? Presentation?
I have attended them, yes. Yeah. And that's set up nice there because it's kind of an auditorium like.
Anything else in the presentation? We just need to work on wording the topic together. Okay.
John, you were quiet about that.
I know, we kind of left you down there.
I know.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just listening.
Okay.
I think we'll have another opportunity probably Wednesday to rehash it a little bit.
And then I'm not sure, I guess this would be time to discuss also who's going to kind of be our leader to guide them throughout the day, our tour guide. And I'm not going just on what our principals meeting said, they just brought up some good points that I hadn't thought of, or I thought of, and it confirmed where I was thinking. I felt like it's important, or it would be a positive to have someone in that position who's going to continue to be in the district. And we can go with any suggestions you have. Drew Tone volunteered loudly, he was at the meeting and said he'd be interested in doing it if we'd like him to.
I love that idea.
I just feel like he's someone that promotes more at the high school level, but he promotes our district on a regular basis. But if you guys have suggestions on someone else that you would like to do that.
Are you talking the person that drives them to the schools, or are you talking about the community tour too?
Well, I wonder if we need to bring someone else in also from the community.
Yes, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roxanne, Benny County Tourism would be someone that would be excellent to do a community tour.
Right, and that, yeah, I think they just talked about people on that.
Right, and we had a few names there too, so I guess our first would be to decide if we would like him to do that part of the tour, or if you guys have other name suggestions, or say, no, we shouldn't do that. I don't like Drew, I don't want him to do it, no, I'm just kidding. Any pros or cons to that, or if you have someone that you would prefer, I don't wanna just decide on my own, 'cause.
Well, I think you got some good suggestions. And
I think you'd be a good one because he's also from the area. He knows. Yeah, I like that idea.
And I did ask him again today to make sure that he really wanted to do that, so he's still interested if that's.
Yeah, and he's just the one driving them to and from, like the building administrator gets the opportunity to take them.
But he's interacting with them still, and
yeah, exactly.
I think there's a lot of information that he has that may just come up on, or if they have questions. So if you're comfortable with that, we'll go with him to do that, and then we can discuss what community member we'd like to have us help us with that community tour.
I think like Roxanne, or even Courtney Pruitt, who's the chief police, he grew up here, went to school here. I'm not sure, Matt Allen's familiar with it,
He grew up here too.
yeah, with the area.
pretty familiar with it.
Yeah.
And we also want some of these people participating in the the meet and greet and maybe even the presentation, so they don't necessarily have to be the person.
And I don't know,
I'm thinking-
Roxanne, is that what you said? Go ahead, John.
I was just thinking of most of the names that you've mentioned here, they're people within the city organization and stuff like that. Have you thought about tagging along an industry person or private business owner to this list opposed to all government entity?
I
You have someone in mind?
Oh, there's several people in our community that, I can provide a list on Wednesday for you. Just off the top of my head, I got 5 or 6 that I would like to throw into that category.
We only need
People
one,
who own
right?
businesses here, that have lived here, that have grown up here,
Yeah.
put their kids through the district here, not just all. I mean, my problem with some of this the whole time has been that, you know, even through the questionnaire processes, is all government entity, and it's all kind of one circle. Like I'd like to break out of that.
Or even maybe our nonprofits or.
Would it need to be the same person every day? I mean, if we kind of have a list of things we'd like them to see, and then, you know, does it have to be the same person every day?
No, I guess that would be a question, another
That'd
question
be-
to ask.
That'd be, I mean, if you can get it, I would suggest it.
The same person.
The same person.
To
Yeah,
have
I
the
think
same
it gives us, I agree with that 100%, because then it gives each interview, each person who applied for the job, they have the same experience opposed to, I mean, you could get a totally different experience. I mean, it's similar to the questions. I think yes, whatever you do with one, you do consistent.
So, we're going over some potentials Wednesday, is that the consensus?
I think nail it down Wednesday.
Okay.
I can think of a few names too, and
Okay.
we'll get together.
The only reason I bring that up is I think, you know, sometimes, there might be a different perspective outside of that circle than there is in that circle. I'm not saying that circle's bad, I'm just saying sometimes on the outside it might be a different view of how things are.
They're definitely stakeholders
Absolutely.
in the community, support our district, so I think it's great, great idea.
Okay, so what have I forgotten of the, anything else on the tour schedule that we need, you feel like we need to have finalized tonight?
Does it look different for, candidates that, internal candidates versus external candidates?
I assume it would, but I'm not, I don't really have the answer to that, so I don't know if.
Because we're trying to do that here, but obviously we like, we're doing like remote.
Mary, or I can send
Well,
an
I think
email with that
everybody
question.
should have to spend some time and talk. I think, you can ask them. I mean, I don't think it's one of those deals where you say, you have to spend an hour riding around with this gentleman or this individual.
Yeah.
So,
Are you guys, set on one per day, that type of schedule? Yeah.
I think you spend as much time with each person as possible, not try to hurry the process.
and it may not be a big gig there on that reception, but sometimes you can learn a lot from somebody in the quiet moments. I mean, there's not a lot of chatter, and so that's why I would hesitate to cram too much into a time frame. Was my apprehension earlier about trying to fit it all into the reception time there.
Well, the thing that, the pro that I could see in one day is when you spread things out, you tend to forget. So the last person, you know what I mean, might might stick better. But I also get the point of not wanting to rush through the day, or feel rushed. So, yeah, I'm good either way.
And then, as for the schools that are listed on here, are those the schools that you feel like we should tour? I wondered if, early childhood should be included on there, or the alternative high school? And how much time do we have? So
I like those schools. I mean, you can't hit everything.
Right, my concern, I just didn't know if we wanted to try to highlight one of those other schools just because they perhaps are unique to different districts, or just stick with, because we probably don't have time to add a school on there.
Yeah, and because you don't, I think you really want to cover a cross-section, and that's a pretty good cross-section.
I don't know though, I do like the idea of the early childhood center.
As opposed to,
I know, that's the only thing.
It's a struggle.
be said for keeping it simple.
Right.
What?
It's the face, people laugh at it.
I can't process a solution to change it, so I kind of agree with keeping it simple. Hopefully we can promote those other two in maybe different sections of the day somehow, even though they're not
If you
going
make
to
sure
the schools.
maybe somebody was represented in either your breakfast or your reception.
Right.
From there, that they could at least
Mhm.
share with them what they're up to, I don't know.
Perhaps at the lunch.
Yeah, the lunch, maybe
Right.
those kind of things.
I just feel like early childhood and it's, I mean, it's just a big issue here because it, I mean, and it seems like we're at capacity and we're just, I mean, there's just so many issues I think that are gonna be coming up with that. But
Well, yeah, I mean, you can learn a lot from somebody and what they ask in
Mhm.
those reception times.
Mhm.
Our candidate, I would hope they would ask about our early childhood
Mhm.
program.
Mhm.
I mean, that reputation precedes us, and on several levels. So I don't think you have to present a whole lot, I mean, everything to them.
Right.
So I think we're good.
We good on the interview schedule?
sure.
We can keep talking about it if you
No,
want.
well, we're gonna manipulate it a bit, right?
Yes, I have some notes on there how to do that, yeah,
Okay.
and I will edit that and get it adjusted.
Yeah, so maybe like, what Jackie said is, if community tours an hour and a half, we could add that extra time up here too.
Yeah.
Nice, how many showed up for your hate school?
I wish I'd taken attendance and I didn't.
Just trying to think and guesstimate. 12?
I think that was more. Probably close, 12 to 15, I think.
Yeah, it was very good turnout.
I'll learn for my next one.
I know.
We'll take attendance just so I can remember who was there. Okay, and then the last thing that was sent to me for us to look at was this tabulation ranking of applicant sheet. I assume that's something we would do after our interview.
Yes.
Have you seen something like this before?
Well, it's just a tool to help you process.
Right, but I mean, is it something we've used previously, or?
I frankly don't remember.
Okay.
Did you see the one, the sample that Jennifer sent to?
And that's the one that, I didn't print that one off. No, I had that on my
Or-
laptop.
Because they, evaluate on the presentation too, which I think is really good.
Oh, yeah, and I should have gotten that one, since we're deciding to do a presentation. I'll have that one printed for Wednesday, and
You can look for that
we
too.
can get copies made. So I can read my notes when I get home. So I'll have that there just for us to talk about on Wednesday and just confirm that's what we wanna do. I think we're on the right track, getting it figured out.
Yep.
Good suggestions tonight. Still need, fill me in on what I'm forgetting, but that was on the to-do list, was those three things, so. 5:30, Wednesday? Yeah, and I had it saved on my laptop.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is the exact one, so I'll double check with her, because they are from it, but
Okay.
I'll just double check.
They've asked for the presentation.
Any questions, concerns on that topic, or we'll just hold everything over to Wednesday? Doing so chatty.
Yeah.
I'd just like to make a comment, like, thank you too for taking the time to go and meet with the principals and get their input. I know that took time out of your schedule, so appreciate y'all doing that.
And they'd like to do it again, they said, so maybe on a regular, once a year, or, and it could even be with different board members, or there's different in these seats, but we got a positive feedback from that, so.
And I think that comes from the whole board, like the encouragement to want to involve, people in this process. It's a huge process. It's a huge decision for the district, and I think people appreciate like bringing up business members, or different people like that. We're trying to be inclusive of our whole community. So.
You're quiet down there.
This is your thing.
I know, but I didn't want to leave you out if you had something to say.
No, ma'am.
Okay, well then we will, move on to new business. Find out if we're gonna spend some money on things.
Not yet.
No. Or we might wanna spend some money.
Soon.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so good evening. I'll be talking to you about District Site Council and the results from the meetings this year. See if I don't mess that up. Awesome. So the purpose of District Site Council is to inform community members about our key issues in the school district. We use this group to create a network of advocates for schools and our important issues in the community, state, and nation. We also use it to develop input for the Board of Education on the use of ESSER funds for the 22-23 school year, and to perform the functions required by KESA, Kansas Education Systems accreditation. So who is on District Site Council? So it is represented by these key members in our community, within our district. 1 to 2 board members, certified teachers that are appointed by GCEA, instruction representatives, technology, so you can kind of see the variety of representatives that we have that serve on this group. So our first meeting was January 13th. It was the introduction to Garden City Public Schools. So gave a brief introduction of our school demographics, our budget review, our budget overview, which also included ESSER funding. So we gave them kind of a definition of ESSER funding, as well as our 3-bucket approach to ESSER funding, helping them kind of understand what our priorities were with it. And then Glenda did a presentation on KESA and state board outcomes. That also she talked about the KESA framework. We had presentations from all departments such as technology, transportation, nutrition. And then we had school presentations, so one from each of the levels, so early childhood, elementary, intermediate, middle school, and high school. On the second meeting, we had a KSB representative that presented on school funding, so our state and federal issues with state funding, and then also Dr. Carlin gave a presentation on advocacy. So advocacy and why we need local voices heard with our legislators. Our third meeting was February 10th. We did the school visits. So we took the group to these 3 schools, so kind of one at each level. We did a tour. It ended in the library at the high school, and we were able to enjoy a delicious lunch that was prepared by the culinary arts students. Our last 2 meetings, which happened last week, we did the ESSER presentations from district staff. So for those who were presenting on proposals for the school year, they were here to report their results and continued funding if they chose to continue the program. As a reminder, we did have a late start due to the timeline from the state in receiving funding and instructions, so that presented some challenges for some of the proposals that were funded this year. At the end of the second evening, the council members received their $100 to vote for their favorite proposals. We had a bag of money, so each of them had $100 to essentially spend, and then a number of proposals for them to go ahead and do their We counted the votes at the end of the evening, and it resulted in a prioritized list of proposals. So majority, we believe, will be funded. Ongoing, there's several of the ongoing programs, so they applied for funding last year. They're asking for continued funding. They presented the results of those programs to us and then requested funding for next year. We did have new proposals that were submitted for this year that we believe will be funded as well. And then some presentations also on proposals that were completed this year and not requested to be renewed. Finalized number that we expect to fund will be later this year. And then you received also the copy of the prioritized list of proposals. Any questions? Go for it.
So everybody who wanted to present a proposal was able to, there were no limitations in terms of the
Yep.
number or anything like that?
Yep, so there was adequate time in those 2 days for us to provide, the presentations were 5 minutes of presentation and 2 minutes of questions. So there's plenty of time to work through the proposals that were submitted.
And then how many people did you have that final meeting?
Voting members were 35.
Any other questions? And we're just presenting on this tonight.
Yep, so no action requested this evening. Since we still have several of those ongoing proposals right now, we'll have a finalized number later, and we'll come back to request authorization so that we can begin funding those proposals.
Yeah.
Sure.
All the existing programs that are asking for additional funding, you said that they presented their results. Were all of those that are on here, they were successful?
Yes. So anything that was on this list was a presentation to District Site Council to then request those funds for the next school year. So, of course, with any of those programs, and because of that kind of tighter time frame, sure, some proposals did have a little bit more barriers, but I think for the most part, we saw a lot of success with what was reported. Any other questions? Dr. Crowley?
Yeah, I might add in there too. So last year, the thing that got the most votes was to set aside some money for each of the schools. I think we called it building ESSERs, and we calculated an amount based mostly on the number of students. The total amount was like $300,000, and I think to date only $93,000 of that's been spent. So there's kind of two accountability pieces in this. There's the accountability piece that we have to make sure each of these things we spend dollars on meets the criteria that the feds give us for ESSERs. And so on those building proposals, when the principals want to spend some money, they got to talk to Colleen to make sure, because if they spend money that's not an ESSERS approved thing, when we get audited down the road, we may be responsible to pay that money back to the feds, and we don't want to do that. The other accountability piece is, so just because it's eligible doesn't mean it's really getting results, and should, is it the best use of our dollars kind of thing. So instead of having them present again, because we're trying to figure out, and some of this is the late start, and so we're just trying to figure out what's the right way to do that. So we didn't have them present because we thought it would get cumbersome and hard to follow. So, and part of the reason that we really can't draw a line right now, we are going to be meeting with the principals to find out what they had in mind to use those dollars for the rest of the year. Should we do a whole nother $300,000 for next year? Is this fact that we got the late start the reason this is a lower number? Because just like with many of these things, a lot of things people want to do is more people, but we can't find the people right now when we're looking for them. So, so there will probably be another amount that we will bring to you as well around those building ESSER proposals, but we still aren't sure what the sweet spot is on that. But again, it's with the same idea. We want to balance the accountability of spending the money like the feds intended it,
but also making sure that what we're doing is really getting us results, so.
Is there a deadline for those building funds to be spent?
Well, the deadline, the deadline is just our deadline, and we have until, the Fed's deadline is September of 2024. But that's what Colleen is working with them right now. Normally, it's the end of the year. We ask all of our funds to be spent by the last week of May or the first part of June. And that's what we're trying to find out from them. Do they have plans for what they were gonna do with that money, and they just haven't gotten to do it? But again, even though they got them late, they knew that money was intended for this year. And so if they really don't have something to spend it on that's gonna make a difference for this year, then maybe we should put everybody back to the 300,000 for next year, and when we can do it all on time. That's the conversation we wanna have with them. But right now, some of them have spent absolutely none, and some of them have spent most of their money, and most of them are in the middle somewhere. So that's why I think at our next meeting with them, we're gonna have that conversation and try to figure out what's the appropriate sweet spot there.
So Steve, there's this expectation out there that this year's ESSER's funds will do good this year.
Correct.
So there's sort of a pressure there in this environment where some have spent almost none and some have spent nearly all. And that's kind of an interesting situation to be in. But ultimately, the accountability has got to be there. If there's this need to have it spent and do good, then the greatest idea can be the greatest idea, but if there's some explanation for why it hasn't been able to be spent, it still needs to be spent to achieve the purposes of the funds.
Right.
And that's the sweet spot you're talking about.
Exactly. And we got a late start. By the time we were drawing this money down, it was the middle of the fall. You know, it was, the regulations were coming out, the requirements, Colleen was figuring all that out. And so certainly not casting blame here. It's just a matter of the intention with all of this is to try to make sure we're using those dollars to get results. And that's what we've asked our district site council to help us do. And, but we just felt like, again, because I don't know how many expenditures have come out of those building funds because they're typically smaller, and then to have them try to explain all their results to this group just seemed like a monumental task. So, so we're trying to figure this thing out and meet the intent of what we set out to do, which was to use this money to have every kid at or above grade level academically and on target or better with their social emotional development. So, interesting.
Appreciate the presentation.
Yep, thank you.
Board open discussion. Who would like to start? Volunteers.
I will.
Mark, start in the middle.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Jackie?
Just absorbing it all tonight.
Don?
It's great to have all the students in and the presentations tonight. I thought that was wonderful, so it's just good to see and meet more people, so enjoyed that.
I'm working on getting these meetings shorter, but I think we had lots of good discussion tonight, so we'll keep trucking away at that. Dana?
I apologize for being late tonight. I'm just out of town, and so got here as quickly as I can. So I was sorry to miss some of the presentations. And just to clarify, it wasn't just a book on farting. You know, my kids are grown, and I've given away most of their books. So some of the books that we have are fan favorites, and hey, what can I say? We like Walter the Farting Dog. Thank goodness the school saved me, and gave me an appropriate book to read, because I imagine the teacher would not have had fun with that whole thing, that whole business afterwards. But I was sorry to miss the being able to be here to hear that presentation, because it was really fun to go into the school, and I'm thankful that they take the time to try and reach out to us and get us involved in those different programs. So definitely encourage that. That third grade class was so fun, and they were really well behaved and listened through the book and asked good questions, and so that's just always really nice to be a part of. And then we have spring break coming up. God, it came like so quickly. So yeah, hopefully things are not like super crazy in the schools and classrooms because my kids already know it's coming up. So anyway, so yeah, things are trucking along, going by quick. Dr. Carlin?
Big event last Friday. We had our Year 5 KISA outside visitation team visit, and kudos to Glenda for putting that together and all the work on accreditation. You know, as we have one of those every year, and it gives us a great opportunity to reflect on the progress that we've made, and we've worked really hard to align the board strategic plan with our KISA efforts, so we don't have staff members that feel like they're getting asked to do just another thing and another thing and another thing. But it's also interesting when you think about, and especially because this is Year 5, as I was going through kind of some thank yous to all the people who have had some kind of part in this, I would bet we've touched every staff member, certainly every faculty member, because like the comment tonight that was made about PLCs, it's not unusual that the topics in those PLCs relate directly back to the goals that this board set as and we have 34 of them, but you told me what your top 5 were a few years ago. And so we have really made that the focus with the schools. And so when you go back and look at the conversations that happen in those PLCs, just like was talked about tonight, how do we connect some of this social emotional stuff, and it's going back to those PLCs. So we really are touching every person out there. And that really was our goal from the beginning, was the boat does a lot better when we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. When somebody's not rowing, the boat doesn't work as well. When somebody's rowing the wrong direction, then it really screws things up. But I think we've really been able to do that with our accreditation efforts. We've made some great progress. We've still got a ways to go in areas, but all in all, I think we've seen our graduation rate go from 80% to almost 87%. Our post-secondary success number has exceeded the state average, or the state predicted rate, not the state average, but for our district, all 5 years that we've been looking at that metric. We've seen great progress in things, when we talked about the tobacco use, and we forget that vaping didn't start until the middle of our cycle. And to see that our number is actually coming down. Now, I'm not naive enough to believe that we don't still have a ways to go there with some of our kids. I mean, I think as a community, we've done a pretty good job maybe limiting exposure at school. But I think the fact we have these great partnerships with community agencies has set the stage that we have a vehicle to be able to continue to make progress in those areas. So we have so many areas like that where we can point and say, areas that align with what we set our board goals out to be, we can show significant progress in those areas, and I think did. So, but that doesn't happen without a tremendous amount of work and organization, and Glenda certainly gets the credit for that. So Glenda, thanks for all your work with that, because that's one of our big 3 things, and I feel great about the progress that we made. So we had that, and that was kind of a nice thing. And then just a reminder that not this Saturday, but next Saturday, there will be another legislative coffee that the chamber sponsors. If you have time to swing in, it's an hour and a half, maybe hour and a half on Saturday morning. And at the last one, we actually had amazing support for public education from our legislators. Nothing that was a surprise. Maybe it was a surprise how much they were willing to come out publicly and recognize our teachers, and that some of the things that are happening at Topeka are counter to what would be good for teachers and to help us with some of our challenges. but to know we have local people that are very supportive is a huge plus. So if you're free on that Saturday, it'll be the last Saturday of spring break, so we may have some people still out of town, and there will be other opportunities later in the spring if that doesn't work for you. So that's it, thanks.
Thank you.
Did you prepare this light reading for spring break? Is that how that?
Exactly, I wanted you all to not be bored.
Get your good glasses on.
Yeah, some of us.
Yeah, some of it's a little hard to read, a little small.
Okay, so our next regular board, or meeting of the Board of Education will take place on Thursday, March 24th, 5 o'clock here in the board's meeting room. I entertain a motion.
For anything? Oh,
If it means I get to go home.
I move that we adjourn.
Second? Second.